Are you able to join yet, Kev? I don't want to invite you if you're busy, but I'm guessing that you're free because you were voice noting me.
Evening.
Does that mean Tammy's doing bedtime?
For now. Yeah, for now. He asked for her, so she's away up with him. But he's been asking for her and then asking for me like half an hour later. But I've told him that I can't go up tonight because obviously I'm doing this. So hopefully he's all right. But if he really digs his heels in, then I'll have to go upstairs. I've been getting notifications all day off TikTok telling us to go live because apparently I've got 2 trending videos at the minute. Which I wouldn't say they were trending. They've had about 1,000 views. Well, the one I did today had about 1,600, and the one I did 2 days ago has had about 1,100.
That's good. What are they, CapCut
So
ones?
yeah, I hate doing them, but you know what it is.
My
I'm
TikTok's really strange. Some of the videos that I don't put any time and effort into do quite well, and like some of the ones that I actually want people to watch don't. Essentially, like you know that stupid video that I made taking the piss out of Ed, where I'm like, please go and watch my film or whatever with the books. That's got nearly 2,000 views. Why? Why have people watched that? Of all my videos, that's the one that people watch. Like,
It's the marketing, yeah. That's what it is. The marketing. Hey, Graham.
but hey Graham, hey Roger. But I've also noticed, that the videos where you have your face in it, it's almost like they are naturally boosted more than the ones that don't.
Yeah,
Because I've done that a few times where it's just been a pointless rant or whatever, and it's got double the views that say a poem has. But I think it's because it's got your face in it.
yeah, possibly. Yeah, possibly.
But yeah, that video that I did about Ed, I think it's got like I think we might be just shy of 2,000, like maybe 1,860 or something like that. But it's one of my more popular videos recently, which is a bit of a joke.
It'll be interesting to see if TikTok's been asking us to go live all day to see if it actually puts any more traffic into this live tonight.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't put a lot of time into my TikTok anymore. I used to be like quite consistent with posting videos, and obviously I was going live a few times a week. And besides this Saturday show now, and an odd video a post every so often, I'm not consistent with it, so that probably doesn't help either. But that's one of the things I was going to touch on actually. So tomorrow is National Animal Rights March Day. And I don't want to 100% rule it out because if it's possible, then I will go, even if it's just for 2 hours. But looking at what it's going to cost me on the train, there's no way I'm driving because I can't park anywhere, and that'll be a fortune. But I would like to go and see because I know Ronnie's speaking in Birmingham and it's not that far. But if not, if I don't do anything, then I was potentially thinking about doing a live tomorrow evening, just so that we've done something, so to speak, or I've done something.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
Because obviously most of them will be finished by about 5, 6 o'clock anyway. So I was thinking if we could do something like similar time to today, or maybe start at 7 or whatever suits, and just go for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. Then it's just something we've done. And for those people that are travelling home or anything like that, they can tune in.
We could all take with dogs for a walk, or go for a walk and do our own little version of the animal rights march.
Yeah, that all could work, I suppose. Yeah. Just heard the word walk, and he's like looking at me as if to say, "Are we?" I'm like, "No, you're not.
Yeah,
Not now." But yeah, it's because I haven't followed any of Epsom today. I know I read this morning when I woke up that I think, anyway, unless I read it wrong, that a number of activists had been arrested before the protest potentially even began, like almost like a dawn raid.
yeah. Well, I think we're not warned off this one, because of obviously the disruption of the last two.
I haven't followed this one as much as some of the others, to be perfectly honest. So I'm not 100% sure. I did just read this morning that something like 18 people had already been arrested.
Yeah, no, I've not been following it either, to be honest with you. I just got a notification on the phone earlier on when I was out, and I meant to read the email because it's from Animal Rising. I meant to read
Yeah,
you
well,
before
I
I
was the same.
remember.
I feel a little bit bad, but I actually muted their email address the other day because they sent me about 5 emails about the lamb, and it's just like, yeah, no, you told me. I saw it on social media as well. Like, still not 100% sure how I feel about that action. I certainly don't need to be told like 8 different times.
Yeah, every time they send you an email, there's a link to like a Just Given page or something.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I get that somebody needs to be able to pay for the care for these lambs,
Well,
but
quite to be perfectly honest, and I mean it's up to them what they spend their money on, but it seems as though they provide everyone with a T-shirt as well.
right.
I don't know if you have to pay for them or not, but it seems like everyone is wearing one. So obviously that's got to be paid for.
I'm not being funny though. I mean, there's probably more important things they could be putting their money towards rather than kitting everyone out in a t-shirt.
It's just free advertising, though, isn't it? All the time, like free marketing. No matter where you are, people will wear those T-shirts in other places and all that sort of stuff. And also, I would imagine, from some of the conversation, which we'll get into now. That, by the way, hi Ronnie and hi Roger, have joined us from like their conversation with
Oh, yeah.
Animal Rising last week. We'll potentially, I don't know, maybe it is kind of that if they're against some of the other groups shouting "you bet they die" and that kind of thing. Maybe it's everyone looks the same, everyone says the same things, everyone's kind of like maybe that's what they're trying to achieve, like that unity. You know, like when you're on a school trip and they're like, "You represent the school when you're wearing your uniform," blah blah blah. So it might be that, I don't know, but you're not wrong.
Yeah, what they do is that those T-shirts are only given to the activists. They're given to the people who take part in the actions, and normally people can then keep those T-shirts afterwards.
Yeah,
On the one they did on the sit-in they did at the dairy place where the cows were kept in those small kind of containers, igloo things.
yeah,
They weren't, because Louise went on that, and they weren't able to keep the t-shirts because they all had to be washed because a lot of them were dirty where people had been lying on the ground, and for
right.
sort of hygiene reasons they all had to be washed. So on that occasion the people that took part in that weren't able to keep the t-shirts, but I think normally they are if they take part in an action.
Fair enough.
If it was biosecurity, wouldn't they have to destroy them, not just wash them?
I don't really know. Um,
Yeah, that's a good
they put
point. Actually, I'm not
away.
sure how that would work
You
either. I
they
suppose if they
probably
were washed, they'd all have to be washed at exactly the same time, and it would have to be quite sort of
Well, you know those
procedure.
white suits that people wear, they're disposable. They're not washable,
Yeah,
are they?
that's very true, and they normally quite often have those shoe disposable things too, and you've got to dunk your feet in the bucket or whatever beforehand. So I don't know. I'm not sure whether washing would be
they were wearing their own
sufficient.
shoes, but I think they were disinfected afterwards. Yeah,
I'm
it
looking at
depends on the
the
it depends on the temperature, I suppose. I think yeah.
I'm looking at the press for Epsom. 17 arrested, I think,
Was that this morning or was that at the event?
at the event.
Right. Okay.
And then
So,
the the big controversy is apparently one person ran onto the track after the race had started.
I saw a clip of that video because that was something I was going to mention. I don't know if you've seen that video, but basically the crowd, as soon as that guy gets tackled and dragged off the field, the crowd are cheering, and it's like, yeah, there's your animal lovers, folks.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, yes, yeah. I think some people were arrested. I think probably what happened was they were staying at kind of various locations nearby
yeah,
prior to going to Epsom. These were the people that were going to take part in trying to run on, I think. And I think the police somehow determined the location of those places and raided them and arrested the people staying there. I think that's kind of probably what happened in terms of the ones that were arrested before the event.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I
maybe
think I
some
think
were
actually on
arrested
that
there.
note, whilst I remember, I was having this conversation during this week. Anyone in here is a sort of an activist that uses an app called Telegram or a couple of others. I think Signal is still okay, but Telegram has been infiltrated for a sort of significant time since before Christmas, probably. So anything that's being organised. Um, they're watching you. They know what you're doing. It's not. It's
I,
not. It's not
yeah,
encrypted like you think it is. You know, they
I,
literally are watching everything you're doing.
I think even on Signal, you see, I think it would be quite easy for someone to infiltrate Animal Rising. You
I
see,
totally agree, especially how easy it seems to
yeah,
be to just turn up
I
to one
kind
of
of
their
think,
things and basically be part of the team.
yeah, I think it kind of, so it's quite likely that they have, um, they kind of do have informers, or they may follow key people or something like that. I think if they're particularly determined, to actually stop. You see, with both this action and the action at Aintree, they'd announced in advance that they were going to do it.
Yeah,
So therefore, that puts far more pressure on the police, and indeed on the government who give instructions to the police to actually stop it. Because if they announce prior to it that they're going to do it, and then they're able to do it and get away with it and stop the race, then that makes the police look pretty bad, and it makes the government look pretty bad for kind of not intervening, seeing as they had prior warning. And
yeah.
so therefore they're going to pull out all the stops to um, to stop
Yes.
those things
It says
happening.
here that they will tackle possible protesters.
Yeah, that's the new that got passed a little while ago in Parliament, didn't it? Where if um, if they believe you are going to protest, they can arrest you. Didn't it come to a head when King Charles was going through the streets or something, and somebody had a lawyer tested it out. He had a blank sign and a marker pen, and he went up to a police
Yeah,
officer and
no, the
said,
guy you're talking about didn't even have a sign. He just stood next to someone who had one
Yeah,
and got
I think
arrested
that
and removed.
"Yeah,
the thing is though that they could have taken that action under existing law, because under the existing law, even before these new laws came in, um, they could arrest people for conspiracy
Yeah,
and
yeah,
hold people on suspicion of conspiracy, and then all of a sudden decide there's not enough evidence and let them go. I mean, way back in the 1970s, as a group of us went to Sabah hunts, and pretty much before the hunt had even started, all got rounded up by the police and arrested for conspiracy and
yeah.
taken to the police station, and they held us until the hunt finished, and then said, "We've decided to let you go. You know, we've decided, we've thought about it, we've looked at it, and we've decided to let you go." And so they let us go, but of course, they succeeded in their aim, which was to prevent us from disrupting the hunt. You see, so that was used way back. I'm talking about the 1970s, and so they already had those powers to do that. And even if it's just a made up thing, and those people weren't planning to do anything, they can still kind of pretend that those people were conspiring and they've arrested them to investigate it, and then all of a sudden, of course, they let those people go, saying, "Oh, we haven't, we've decided there's not enough evidence," or something like that. They've still succeeded in preventing those people doing what, you know disrupting the event. So it's kind of, although these new laws do kind of um, make it more difficult to protest in certain circumstances. A lot of they could still do loads of stuff under existing laws.
Hey, Ronnie, would it mean that the Sabs can't go out now because they could be arrested on the way?
Well, you see, the thing is that
They always
technically,
could be, yeah.
they always could be, because you see, they could, they could arrest a load of Sabs uh, on, say, conspiracy to cause a public nuisance, right? Hold them in the police station until the hunt is over, and then let them go.
So yeah. Using the
Uh,
same
uh,
logic, you'd think though that can't
yeah,
they also arrest the hunters before they get out on the potential
yeah,
that
but of
they're the
course,
conspiracy to go and hunt? You know.
but of course they're not going to do that.
No,
What we
but essentially the legislation's in place to do exactly the same thing with the hunting.
Yeah, well, yeah. You see, the thing is, but you see, the police the police are meant to be the servants of the people,
Yeah.
but in actual fact, they're the servants of the governments, and they're there to serve the government will. And because
You
the
don't
government,
say.
yeah, because the government is much more keen to arrest and prevent protesters than they are to arrest and prevent people going hunting. The police will be instructed to take action against the protesters rather than against members of the hunt, because of course, these hunts are breaking the law all over the place. So of course they could be arrested for conspiracy to break the law and held, and be prevented from hunting. But that is, that's not the political will of the government to do that.
No. But yeah, I suppose this is something we're going to see potentially more and more of.
We will under this government, and this is why the answer to the whole problem is something much more fundamental. This is why I argue that the answer to it all is vegan education, because if we're ever going to change the type of people we've got in government, we've got to create a lot more vegans, otherwise it's never going to happen. And so that's the fundamental, that's the really fundamental solution to the problem.
They'll make that legal as well.
I think they'd like to. I think there are a lot of people in this government that would
That
love
would be
to
funny though if they tried to make veganism illegal, because first of all they'd have to actually understand what it means. Because at the moment, as it stands, the only thing that would be illegal would be a plant-based diet.
But you see, I think they could. You see a lot of stuff that that kind of we do in terms of promoting veganism is kind of already sort of technically against the law. It's like street stalls. You see, if you hold a stall in an information stall in the streets, that really is, and I think probably it would probably be a case with all local authorities that's technically in contravention of council local authority bylaws.
Yeah.
And so if they want to enforce those bylaws and they want to move you on, they can, but it's just that in most cases they don't bother. But some years ago when the Shack campaign was going against the Huntingdon Life Sciences, and there was a determined effort by the government to kind of close that campaign down, they issued instructions to local authorities and to the and to the police in local areas that if they see a stall on the street promoting Shack, to move the people on, and that's what happened. And there was loads of places where people couldn't do information stalls promoting Shack because they'd get moved on, and that was because they decided to enforce that particular law when in most cases they don't bother to enforce it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy, isn't
So
it? I mean,
good.
I know
If they,
Northeast Animal Rights was trying to do like a vegan performing arts day in Newcastle a couple of years ago, and because there was basically she was applying for a busker's license because that's essentially what we would need. But because there was more than one person performing, the class that is a gig, and they tried to get they asked them for something stupid like £5,000 or £6,000, and she would have needed security and all sorts. And we're like, you're talking about having 4 vegans singing and reciting some poetry,
yeah, it's very much at their discretion because technically, these rules and regulations do exist. It's just that in most cases, they don't bother to enforce them. But they could if
To
they
be
want.
honest, though, singing vegans does seem like a health and safety issue.
It kind of does. Highly dangerous, isn't it, to come within anywhere near a singing vegan? Yeah, be fatal. But you see, so that's so it depends on what instructions really come down from the government. Now, it would be quite hard to imagine them wanting to close down vegan information stalls, but you kind of never know. I mean, if this government carried on the trajectory that it's currently on, then give them long enough and they may well do that. I mean, it doesn't seem very likely at the moment, but they're doing things now that, say, 20, 30 years ago would have been unimaginable, in terms of infringement of civil liberties.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask about that because obviously the Council for Civil Liberties used to be quite influential, but you don't hear much about them anymore, do you?
No, I mean, conspiracy charges themselves used to be much rarer than they are now. And when they first started kind of using them, there was a big fuss from civil liberties people, but that's kind of all died away. They've kind of just got away with it, and now the use of conspiracy charges is really, well, it's much more common than it used to be.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, how do you both feel after your conversation on Monday? Like, do you feel like you made any progress? Do you feel like anything's changed? Are you happy with their answers?
Well, I don't think it was a question of progress. I mean, it's their campaign, and it's their, they can do what they want and they can say what they want. I mean, it's their gig, really. I mean, my interest was, but although Ronnie and I really kind of spoke about this after we were on air, is if the activists are getting a bit restless about not liking the claims making, why would they go rather than do their own thing, kind of thing?
Yeah.
So I think they are in danger, possibly of alienating the vegan activists. And as we said in the show, the vegan activists are the most active of the activists. There's no such thing as a reduced vegetarian activist. When have you last seen a vegetarian stall, for example, right? So if they do alienate the vegans, it would really curtail quite a lot of what they can do. I mean, they might be able to do the Epsom thing without vegans, but they wouldn't be able to do dairy thing without vegans, which is the point that Ronnie made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they, yes, certainly with the dairy thing, they put out a message calling all vegans, because they knew that the only people that would actually take part in their disruption of the dairy depots, which occurred last September, would be vegans. You see,
But
so they're
isn't that
calling all.
just a straight up admission that animal lovers doesn't work then, even as a slogan?
I think in terms of their, you know, in terms of getting their volunteers and their recruits to take the action, they knew that the only people who would be prepared to take those actions would be vegans. So they aimed their sort of recruiting message at vegans.
But
And then, of course, when the
Yeah,
vegans,
but Andy, going back to your point, right? Essentially, what you've got there is you've got some animal lovers invading a race course, and a lot of other animal lovers cheering them when they get arrested. So
Yeah.
I mean, even if you wanted to say that there's a lot of animal lovers, it's certainly not a nation
And
of.
the thing is, that was Animal Rising's video that I watched. So that wasn't someone like criticizing them or anything else. That was the video they uploaded of their protester being arrested. But yet the entire crowd cheered the moment that they were dragged off. So if you're trying to reach the general public with this animal lover thing, all of those people there would probably say they're animal lovers or horse lovers.
but you know how Animal Rising was saying that it's a great opportunity to get non-vegans out with vegans and have the conversation. Could you imagine getting a bunch of vegetarians or even people that consume animal flesh still to a dairy farm and see the reality of what they're paying for? Would that not be a much more productive
Yeah,
action for those
it might
non-vegans?
actually change their mind about things. Yeah, but I think they
Yeah.
already know that that's not the case because I mean they more or less admitted when you were speaking to them that they know that it's not true, it's a myth, and they're just kind of using it to potentially trigger people. But there's only so far you can push that. Like I said loads of times, every time you're doing that, you're digging yourself this hole that you're probably not going to get back out again. You're going to be lumbered with a small group of people that match what you're saying, and you're going to alienate
Well,
everyone
they
else.
they did kind of hint that the claim would become we're supposed to be a nation of animal lovers and this kind of stuff, uh, as though they would say we are at first, and then say in our experience it turns out that we're not, and so but we're supposed to be. I don't really know if that's going to improve things for them in terms of what they say really, but they kind of hinted that that was their strategy. Now, whether that was their strategy all along, or whether they're just reacting to things as they develop, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
the main thing that will alter um, their messaging, I think, won't be what Roger and I said to them or asked them. It'll be um, it'll be their activists or their potential activists.
Well, yeah, I mean, you
It,
say
it,
that though, but it seems like
it,
they're happy to listen to the likes of Tobias, and I'd much rather listen to the pair of you than him.
yes, and I mean, maybe they will
So
take on.
you'd like to think they came on the show. Obviously, they were probably a bit dubious about what was going to be said and everything else. So I'd like to think they came on because they were interested in your opinion and are going to take something away from it.
Well, yes, hopefully so, hopefully so. But of course, if they end up not getting enough activists to carry out their actions, then because of their messaging, then they're going to need to seriously think about what they're saying, because then they're not going to be able to do anything, because they're not going to have the people to do it. And there is a lot of dissatisfaction at grassroots level from, from ordinary activists I've
I'm with
spoken
you
to.
on that.
So
But Ronnie, you did say that the activists will carry on doing the actions because that's what they like to do, the activist bit.
Yeah, well,
And
I
I
think,
think that's what Animal Rising have really got going for them, hasn't it? Regardless of
yeah,
what they say and everything else, they're pretty much the only group out there, or national group out there at the moment, that are doing anything direct.
yeah, and I think this, this is the difficulty that, um, because primarily people want to do the actions, they'll kind of keep quiet and, um, just so that they can, do the actions. So I think that's kind of what
Yeah, I think you made a good point about the inclusivity as well, especially if there isn't anywhere else that kind of allows for people from all walks of life to come and be included, and actually they make that effort. I think
yeah,
that's a big selling point too, isn't it?
yes, and I think this is the thing. I mean, when Louise says to me that when they have their meetings, because they have online meetings and stuff, and they even meet even face to face, before the obviously before the dairy action, the action at the dairy farm, um, there were groups of them staying at different places, and then they would all go to the dairy farm, and so and they'd have discussions, and Louis spoke out very strongly about I'm what happened was they kind of they filmed everyone at the dairy farm. All of the people there, or a lot of them made statements, which Animal Rising made into a video. You
Hmm.
see, and Louis said about that. Basically, if members of the public, um, you know, don't like the fact that you know, these calves are being kept in such confinement, then the answer to that is for people to go vegan. And she did say that. But then afterwards, she actually said to the Animal Rights people, I know that that part will be cut out of the video. I know you won't allow that part in. I know that. And of course they didn't. They cut that out. And so and she does speak out and does say you should be proclaiming veganism. But of course, what happens, and then she finds that other people agree with her. But if she hadn't said anything, none of those other people would have said anything.
Yeah, you find that a lot.
Yeah, you see, and they'd have kept quiet, because I think, she's been going years. She's experienced. She goes way back. Like kind of hardened activist in a sense. Whereas a lot of them aren't. They're young people, or certainly new people, and so they haven't got the confidence to speak out and say what they
can I
feel.
can I just say something to Jonathan Cage? My flatmate has just said to me, "Oh, you're listening to vegan brainwashing again." Well, if your flatmate has any questions, we'll be quite willing to field them. We've got activists, from 51 years down, really, in terms of experience. So, feel free to ask away.
The other thing is with regard to brainwashing, who are the biggest brainwashers? You
Yeah,
know,
I've just put in there with I've just put in mind correction with a star.
who are the biggest brainwashers? All the time people are bombarded with adverts about consuming dairy products, eating meat. So isn't that brainwashing? Surely that's kind of a much greater form of
Yeah,
brainwashing.
absolutely. I think one of the most common examples you see is that grown adults that have been through definitely one form of education, sometimes even a second and third form of education, still genuinely believe that cows make milk for fun.
Which,
Genuinely, or is it that we are not animals as human beings?
Well,
So
certainly
yeah,
that
the
we're not
brainwashing is
mammals.
deep.
That's the issue with regard to drinking milk, whether your own mother's milk or the mother's milk of another species. It relies on understanding the necessity of that to understand that we're mammals. But it seems that people don't understand that as well, even deny it.
I think they have to, though. It's the only way that you can understand, I suppose. It's kind of like you block that untruth out so that you can buy the rest of the crap. Otherwise, it makes no sense. I mean, if you actually sat there and thought about it and went through a list of mammals in your head and think, well, why are cows the only ones? The only ones. But nobody thinks like that because they just deny it, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about brainwashing, just that example alone is massive. And we're talking adults, grown adults, people that should know
Yeah,
better.
well, the truth is that all these adults are drinking the baby food of another species, but of course that's the last thing that they're going to think, because that's the last thing that anybody tells them, right?
I think this guy that thinks we're brainwashing people is frightened he'll lose testosterone. Te- to- Testosterone, isn't it? Testosterone. If he goes vegan and
Toblerone.
is physically active.
Toblerone.
But just look at the number of athletes that uh, consume a vegan
Yeah,
diet.
but
There's
I mean, what do these people think? Do they think that like you've got some sort of meter in your body where if your testosterone levels get too low, that you just automatically change sex or something happens? Like,
oh,
what
but
is
they're
their
not.
fear? What
But
is
they're
the
not
worry?
low. If people are physically active, look at the athletes. Look at Djokovic. You know, the world champion tennis player.
Yeah,
He
I think both finalists. I can't think
the
what the other guy's name is.
other guy. I think Djokovic was more kind of what you might call vegan. I think the other guy. I don't know whether he was on totally a vegan diet. Last year's Wimbledon final, this is, but he was very much. You know, he
Yeah,
ate
it was an entirely plant-based final, wasn't it?
entirely
Yeah, yeah,
plant
yeah.
based. You see, and then you've got other athletes. You've got a number of you know, kind of top class footballers who are vegan, both male and female. Um, One of the strongest men in the world, that guy from Germany, is vegan, isn't
Patrick
it?
Babumian. Yeah.
Pulls trucks along with his teeth and all that thing. So, and the video to kind of get that guy to watch is one called Game Changers, which you can find which is on YouTube.
I just
And that,
heard that there's going to be a sequel to that.
Yeah, I just found that out today as well.
yeah, yeah.
How much
So,
money do they need to make it?
yeah.
Well,
So,
well,
It
well.
only got a
Let's
quarter
hope
to
that
change it again and
Arnold's not going to be
again.
this one then.
Yeah.
yeah. So get him to watch Game Changers. Game Changers. There's loads of vegan athletes on Game Changers, and it explains why, in terms of um, physical performance, the vegan diet is actually better.
It wasn't just that though, was it? It was they did things like blood pressure and cholesterol levels on the fire department. They did erectile performance
Yeah,
on
if it's
some American
if
athletes
this
as
guy's
well.
if this guy's worried about testosterone because he thinks it might affect his erectile performance,
Yeah,
then he
what the
shouldn't.
hell's quite good for that as well, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
got some of those
Yeah,
facts in it.
and that study that they touched on in Game Changers is recently just concluded, and it showed that people that were on a plant-based diet had more regular and stronger erections whilst they slept, which indicated they would have better blood flow, therefore have a better
yeah,
time in the sack, so to speak.
yeah. That's it's well worth watching for anyone that has kind of doubts about health and fitness regarding the vegan diet. Certainly, Game Changers is a really good. Of course, that's not the reason. That's not the reason we're vegan. We're vegan because we're opposed to the oppression and exploitation of other animals by humans, and indeed all oppression and
Exactly.
exploitation. That's why we're vegan. But of course,
I think
there's
this
also huge health
testosterone,
benefits.
the testosterone thing's a bit of a myth anyway, isn't it? Because I mean, the idea that and it's usually soy, so the idea that phytoestrogen can impact your testosterone levels to a noticeable level when you're consuming mammal estrogen through dairy is just laughable, really, isn't it? And they've seen that phytoestrogen can have positive effects on women going through the menopause, whereas mammal estrogen can actually make the symptoms worse. So it's just yeah,
So hang on, So apparently there's all this testosterone in baby cow growth formula that doesn't affect
no
women.
estrogen. So
So,
there's
so,
No, but I
so,
mean, I'm talking about like the misconception. So you couldn't give
yeah.
it up because you're worried about your testosterone levels. So why doesn't that affect women? If they
so
need to take like weekly top up, can the cow distinguish between who's the consumer? I mean, what? I've just never heard so much shit.
yeah, yeah. Someone's asked what exploitation on in the chat. Now, what exploitation? I mean, the kind of, you know, the use of animals. There's, you know, human beings we're not entitled to use other animals for any purpose.
Yeah. Also, before you answer that, Ronnie, the same person said support British farming, and of course, we vegan will do that. It's just that obviously we're critical of some of it, but we're
Yeah, we're
supportive of
not
a lot of
against
it.
Yeah,
farmers. We're against who you farm.
we're against farming because there is no. We can all survive perfectly well without farming animals, uh, without using them,
Yeah.
without sending them to slaughter at only a fraction of natural lifespan. There is no need for us to do any of that in order to survive. So therefore, it must be wrong. If we have a choice between doing that and living on a diet that doesn't involve that, then morally we're obliged to choose the more humane, the most humane choice, aren't we? And so therefore, it must be wrong
I,
to farm animals because we have that choice.
exactly.
Yeah, Tiny T says, but not everybody will go vegan. Well, you could say not everybody will not be racist, and not
Yeah, I mean, look at
every
America,
man
right?
will.
Not everyone can not kill one another, but it doesn't mean that killing is still not wrong.
I,
No,
I
that's
think I
one
think we
country.
may be. I think we may be, but being vegan involves killing animals. Well, kind of, how does it involve killing animals? That's the question, and I think we're going to know what the answer is to that, aren't we? Shall we wait and see? Shall we wait and see what the answer is to
Yeah,
that?
I want to wait because I don't know
Yeah,
what
yeah.
the answer to
Wait and
that'll be.
see
Yeah,
what
Is,
the
but
is
answer.
Ronnie going to
we
do?
also have solutions to those problems, whereas no one else
Should we
even
wait and
seems
see?
to see
The,
them
the,
as a
the,
problem. I mean,
the thing
crop
is
dust has
that,
only
but you
become an
see,
issue
not
since vegans
not
opposed it.
not everyone will go vegan. Well, I agree that not everyone will go vegan because you see, veganism is a philosophy, and it's a philosophy of animal liberation. It's a philosophy that other animals should not be exploited or oppressed by humans. Right? Now, not everyone's going to agree with that, but of course, if a substantial number of us do agree with that, then we're going to be the ones in charge, and we're going to call the shots, and so we can put an end to animal farming, and that would be the right thing to do. And so, although not everyone's going to go philosophically vegan, it's very possible to have an animal liberationist society where we're the ones in control and we're the ones that call the shots. And so, we are going to prevent animals from being oppressed and exploited, and that's what we need to go for.
Yeah, I mean, there was people back in the day that weren't opposed to slavery, like slavers, and you can bring that into modernized time and look at things like trafficking and think, those people, they'd probably be
Now,
supportive of slavery too. So,
there's,
yeah,
yeah,
the general consensus still, though, worldwide, is that slavery is wrong.
yeah. You see, there's this stuff about now. You see, this is it now. Growing soya, yes, growing soya does cause huge harm to natural habitats, but the vast majority of soya isn't grown to feed humans, it's grown to feed farmed animals. So if everyone adopted a vegan diet, we would have to grow far less soya than we grow at the moment. So therefore, the way to deal with the problems that are caused by the growing of soya, where that exists, is to adopt a vegan diet, and
Yep.
it's with the use of pesticides that a
Plus,
huge
you know what also might change? Maybe even the way that we grow soy in the
Yeah.
future.
yes,
Like where we don't even
well,
arable farm it and we grow it in
well, soy,
vertical farms in
well,
factories
well,
instead. So like all these problems don't even exist
yeah,
anymore.
soy is primarily a protein crop. And according to George Monbiot in his recent book Regenesis, the best way that we can produce protein and fat, because of course there's a similar problem, that there's people talk about, the most environmentally harmful way of producing fat is through, when that fat's obtained from other animals through animal farming. That's the most environmentally harmful way of producing it. But of course, harm is caused to the environment by other ways of producing oils, such as palm oil, for instance. That tends to be the big one.
Yeah.
But both oil and protein could be produced by a process called bacterial fermentation, which doesn't involve growing crops. It's produced in vats. It's like similar to a brewing process, but produced in vats. And the amount of land that would would take up that the whole of the world could be fed from an area on protein and fat. Enough could produce for the whole of the world in an area the size of London. So think about the amount of land that would free up that could go back to forest if we only need an area of the size of London to produce all our fat.
Yeah, mate, imagine if it wasn't even the world, right, and it was just the United Kingdom.
Yeah, yeah,
That would still be a huge, huge
Yeah, it
win.
would be massive.
yeah.
Yeah.
You see, so we've got to look at ways. We've got to look at ways of freeing up far more land for rewilding, because this is a very important way of combating the climate crisis. Because we've destroyed so much forest, and that forest has mainly been destroyed for animal farming in one way or another, either to grow crops to feed to farmed animals, or to clear to directly have those animals living on that land, for grazing. Um, if we had no animal farming, if we were able to produce our protein and our fat through bacterial fermentation, it would free up a massive amount of land that would go back to forest. Which, I mean, most if you leave most areas of land, they go back to forest. That's the sort of base eco.
Yeah, land is good at doing that. What
Yeah,
about has anybody got any I mean, you might have seen studies about this because it's kind of like a logic and a maths issue here. I think what happens is people think, well, vegans eat a lot of soy, so if the world goes vegan, that means a hell of a lot of soy will be eaten. But what they don't do is factor in the amount of soy that's already eaten by the other animals. And so even a world full of soy eating humans would still be using less soy than the world as it is now. But I wonder
yeah,
if anybody's ever
yeah.
done the maths on it.
Well, the
Well,
other thing that you could potentially do the maths on as well, that would be quite interesting, would be to see how much soy, say, McDonald's, KFC, Wendy's, all of these fast food chains use as a bulking agent versus plant-based products.
Yeah,
Because
it's even
most of
in
those
bread.
burgers contain like 25%, 30% soy that all these people don't even realize it's in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing we need to take account of, and where research has been done, is on
Nice friend.
the relative numbers of mammals on the Earth. And if we look at the relative numbers of mammals on the Earth, and they've done this by weight, that 60% of mammals on the Earth are actually farmed animals. 36% are humans, and only 4% are wild mammals and mammals living in the wild. Only 4%. So the vast overpopulation there that's consuming all this food uh, that's being grown to feed them, or in terms of grazing, are taking up a massive amount of space that could go back to forest, are farmed animals. 60% of mammals on Earth are farmed animals. 70% of birds on Earth are birds that are farmed for human consumption. Only 30% are wild, free living birds. And this is the extent to which animal farming has completely, completely skewed up things in terms of the numbers of various animals on Earth. And that is, really crucial reason why we need to get rid of animal farming and move to a vegan diet.
Yeah.
I
And, and
did my time tunnel on Kathleen Janaway, and there's a talk from 1992 which is still online. But I wonder whether the people who started the vegan social movement would realize how bad it would get. I mean, I don't suppose they'd ever think that we'd get a situation where only 4% of mammals on the planet would be free living beings. I don't even think, even though they were issuing warnings about what they used to call global warming in those days and everything, but I don't suppose they realized how bad it was going to get.
Well, what's happened is, obviously, the amount of animal products consumed on this planet has increased, and it's kind of sort of increased for two reasons. One, just the increase in population. The population has increased, and it's increased greatly since the days of the vegan pioneers. But the other thing is that countries that previously lived mainly on a plant-based diet have kind of started consuming more animal products, because the cost of those animal products has become cheaper, mainly through factory farming. You see, so
Yeah.
people are able to afford that. People see it as a status symbol as well to eat meat, because at one time it was only the rich people at one time in this country, it was only the rich people that really ate meat, and the poorer people, very rarely got to eat meat. They mostly, ate vegetables and
Well,
grains.
eating chickens was a weekend thing, wasn't it?
But there's the thing, you see. So people
Yeah.
see it as a status symbol, and so as soon as they're able to afford meat, they buy it and eat it. And so this is sort of the one of the reasons why the consumption of meat and other animal products has increased. But that is a reason. The way we counter that is more vegan outreach, and by supporting people in those countries that are promoting veganism. That's the way we counter that.
Yeah, Graham says something interesting here. So those people now are starting to have obesity issues, as things like, I remember doing quite a lot of sociological research about Japan, and it was quite an isolationist kind of protectionist society that were very kind of guarded about sharing their culture, allowing other cultural artifacts in. Although ironically, they were a little kind of magpie about that. They would kind of cherry pick what they liked, as it were. But one thing that was found was that once the Japanese kind of started to travel around the world a lot more than before, because they used to be a very insular society, and then they ended up in Britain and the States, and then they started eating junk food, which they'd never done before. The health crisis there really kind of escalated, and so it goes to show that our Western diet, to say that, was never great for people who were isolated from it, and they were kind of protected from it, really, more than isolated.
But you see, 60% of people in the world are actually lactose intolerant. They're actually lactose intolerant because they've not had a history. Because what happened over here is like there was a time when nobody drank milk over here. And then when cows were introduced and people started drinking milk, what happened way back in the day was the ones that were lactose intolerant just died off. You know, people say, oh, they've got a strange disease, they've died off. Nobody knew it was to do with lactose intolerance. So what's happened in countries like the UK and other European countries, Ireland, for instance, is that the population has been genetically um, uh, uh, kind of what is it? I've forgotten the word. Selected.
Selected, yeah.
It's been selected to be more tolerant of lactose. We've still got loads of people that are lactose intolerant, of course, but that's because the
Yeah,
ones.
but the lactose intolerance just makes them feel bad, Ronnie. So it would be the same with the celiacs.
Yes.
If everybody kept on eating wheat, etc., that celiacs were actually found fatal, they would die, but all the lactose intolerant people would still be around. It's just that
Yes.
they wouldn't feel very good.
Well, they wouldn't feel very good. So
Yeah.
therefore, their kind of um, their ability to reproduce would not be so great. So what's happened is through having dairy herd in this country for like hundreds of years, you know, you know, our society has in general become more tolerant of lactose because the people that are lactose intolerant weren't able to reproduce as well as the other ones. You see, but in other countries where they've never had dairy, that hasn't occurred. So the majority of people in those countries are still lactose intolerant.
I don't believe we've got a Hitler question.
Well, Hitler was Hitler a vegan? Hitler question.
Yeah, apparently Hitler was vegetarian for a short period of time, allegedly not on compassionate grounds, which I'm quite
Between
surprised about.
meals.
Yeah, between meals. Yeah, exactly. I'm surprised that Hitler wouldn't have potentially went vegetarian or concoctioned.
I'm pretty sure the vegetarian claims are true. I mean, it's pretty well sort of documented. I mean,
Well,
it's
Andy, he was one of your animal lovers, though. Don't forget.
yeah, this is it. He was apparently. I mean, this is exactly a great example. So Hitler, one of the most oppressive human beings that's ever existed, was against animal cruelty. Tell me that people don't make the connection better than that.
I read somewhere once, and this might not be true, but I read somewhere once that Hitler got the idea for the designs, or the designer of concentration camps and prisoner of war camps, from intense chicken farming. I mean,
Yeah.
that might
Well,
not
it
be
was it
true,
was the
but
Chicago stockyards where he got the the execution kind of techniques from.
But
yeah,
to think that the Nazis in general, particularly cared about animals is untrue. For instance, Goering was a huge hunter, a massive hunter of other animals. And the reason why Goering was able to, because he committed suicide, didn't he? He dodged the noose after the Nuremberg trials. The
He
reason
hunted himself.
the reason for that. Now, what happened was he befriended one of the prison guards who was an American soldier, and this soldier was an avid hunter, and they formed up that they kind of had a friendship because they were both big hunters, and because of that friendship, he persuaded that guard to break the rules and get this.
And
It
that was the beginning of the NRA, probably.
Yeah, what it was some cream that was in Goering's property, which he wasn't allowed to have. He persuaded the guard to get this cream for him, and hidden in the cream was a cyanide pill. And
Mhm.
that's how Goering was able to commit suicide. It was through his friendship with another
Yeah,
hunter.
do you know what though? I reckon one of the things that confuses people about the Nazis and Hitler and all all these kind of arguments is their stance on animal experimentation because they they weren't opposed to it, but they really cut down on it. But that's because they realized that if they did it on humans, they wouldn't have all the species extrapolation problems,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's the only reason. Nothing to do with the fact that they were opposed to it, just the fact that why do it on other animals when you can do it on humans?
yeah. Why do it on other species when you've got a more scientifically conclusive
Yeah, it's
method of
kind of
doing it?
yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah, of
that is just quote unquote good science at that stage.
course it
Yeah,
is.
absolutely. Especially when you've got people like Mengele that are leading the team. I mean, he definitely knew. I mean, that's why he had an obsession with experimenting on twins because he worked out that they were the best test subjects because he could witness potentially the effects on the other one emotionally and trauma based and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I mean, to be perfectly honest, you see it gets suggested now as like they should test on like child predators and stuff like that. But we wouldn't be allowed to do anything like that now, human rights wise. These are the kind of things that we've progressed to in some aspects, but in other aspects we've massively regressed in our understanding of basic things. But people don't want to look at this information. They don't want to look at the actual I mean, if lots and lots of times, I'm sure you've heard this Hitler thing come up and up and up and up. But if anyone actually looked at it and thought, well, it says here, like, even on his like Wikipedia, I'm sure it says that he was vegetarian because he was against animal cruelty, and it's like, but this is what we're saying. Like,
But you
do you
see,
know what
but
I
but
think
but,
about that?
but how many animals suffered? How many animals suffered and died in the war that he started?
Yep.
Yeah.
In all that bombing, all that shelling, all that, driving tanks through natural habitats. How many millions of other animals suffered and died because
Yeah,
of it?
one little curious part of that, Ronnie, is that I always remember the fact that when Watson said that he was kind of lucky because they tried to bomb Leicester and missed and then bombed Coventry instead, and so if they'd have hit their proper target, but then they started to put all these lights up in the Peak District National Park, and to try to replicate a city like Leicester or Coventry in order to confuse the bombers. And so they would switch off all the lights in the actual city and turn them back on again out in the wilds, as it were. But just think about the other animals killed then.
Oh, yes.
You know,
I
they're
mean,
bombing, you know, peatland and stuff.
yeah, the main victims of war are not humans. The main victims of war are other animals, and those other animals are victims of like just crass human stupidity of people wanting to fight one another instead of just getting on. Do you know what I mean? And it's the other animals that are the victims of that. You know,
Yeah.
other animals used in warfare. I mean, for hundreds of years, horses were used. Then they used pigeons, didn't they, to carry messages? And those pigeons would be shot down out of the sky.
Well, look at those famous pictures of the horses in World War I with the gas masks and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 All the time, other
And I
animals.
suppose as well that the other is especially like from the damage from tanks and all that kind of stuff. We're not talking like a few weeks before it rectifies. You're talking years and years of habitat destruction.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely appalling. It's in, and I think often people don't think about that. They don't think about, you know, the fact that it's mainly, like for instance, on Remembrance Day, you've got the red poppy to remember the humans that were killed in war, but there's a purple poppy as well. I
yeah.
always wear the purple poppy in memory of all the animals
I
that
mean, shit, if you
perished.
just thought about it, think of how many animals were disrupted or killed just in the digging of trenches alone.
Massive, and also stuff like submarine stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
because ships
And not
cause
those mines all over the place.
mines in the sea,
Yeah, well,
submarine.
let's not forget Vietnam and Agent Orange. I mean, that
Yeah,
was
yeah. And I
Absolutely.
suppose obviously every single one of those ships that was sunk are full of oil.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely. And then you've got Hiroshima and Nagasaki
yeah,
and
yeah.
nuclear bombs and the number of other animals that would have. I mean, like loads of innocent humans were killed in that. There were babies killed in that, little children killed in
Well,
that.
and
You know,
for decades and
yeah,
decades afterwards, born with all sorts of
But they
yeah.
were
deformities
all
and
animal lovers, guys. Come on now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you see, I kind of, yeah. I mean, going back to animal rights because we did start talking about that, and I think it is an important topic. I mean, the animal rising thing, it just seems strange to me that, that they kind of admit that is an untruth, that, this nation is one of animal lovers, but like they're still prepared to kind of perpetuate an untruth when they could really get the same kind of message across without saying it like that.
Well, they're trying to use a myth, aren't they? Most people, what they do is they
Yeah,
challenge myths, but these are trying to use it, aren't
they
they?
use it, but I kind of, um, uh, I just think it's like, why say something that at some stage you have to kind of unsay? It just
I,
makes
I,
sense.
I agree, and I think some of the
Um,
few people that aren't vegan that do kind of fall for this, so to speak, or get on board based on this are going to feel a bit deceived when they do make that announcement somewhere down the
yeah,
line.
well, whether they ever will make that announcement,
Well, yeah, exactly.
you know, and then the other main problem I've got with their messaging is they don't encourage ordinary people to go vegan. And
Yeah.
and I I think that's a huge mistake. I mean, I don't accept that they seem to think that vegan is a scare word. Basically, I mean that's what it really comes down to. You know, the guy on there, Alex he was quoting all sorts of research they'd done, but fundamentally, it comes down to the fact that, if you say vegan, you scare people off. That's really what it always comes down to. And I kind of don't accept that that's the case.
No, same. I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah,
so
I
either.
don't accept. I think what you have to do is make it more familiar.
I mean, let's look at this seriously, honestly. If we started all new TikToks, no one knew who he was, and I started doing a show called It's That Plant-Based Show on a Saturday, do you think everyone would come in all like, oh, this is nice, like, oh, this is much more
Oh,
comfortable. Yeah, I
well,
definitely want to talk about this now. How do I join? No.
I think it would be probably even more accurate to call it. We need to have a conversation about how we treat animals show, or we need to have a conversation about how we can love animals without hurting them show. That would be more in line with what with what animal, because they're not even encouraging ordinary people to go plant based. They're
No,
not they're
no,
not
no.
encouraging ordinary people to actually do anything. All they're saying is let's have a conversation. And what do people take from that? They're good. You have to kind of guide people as to what you want people to do. and it's kind of just doesn't, they're expecting that people can,
Well,
somehow.
there is that research though, Ronnie, and almost like on a commonsensical level too, is if you persuade people to want what you want, then without giving them, a route map, they'll find their way.
Yeah. Just on that note, when you were saying, Ronnie, I think you made a really good point that Animal Rising aren't encouraging or trying to influence non-vegans to go vegan, and it's not in the messaging. Obviously, that is ultimately their aim, isn't it? Is to get the information out there so that non-vegans see it.
Well,
But you could argue that VFC probably does a better job of trying to target non-vegans with their social media campaigns that they have, and that's just a plant-based food company. Obviously, it's run by an activist, or two activists, I believe. One of them is a chef. Um, but they show the realities of what goes into the food industry, I suppose, and relate it back to animal rights with every message that they put out.
yeah, I think the way that that we actually need to be talking about veganism more rather than not talking about it, so that it becomes familiar to people and more people, get to know what it's all about. We need more.
It seems strange, doesn't it, Ronnie, that
Yeah,
suddenly you've got, at this stage of the 21st century, you've got suddenly a new movement, just rebranded, and they're still so. It begs the question where they're getting it from, and we're speculating it's from Melanie Joy and Tobias Leonhardt and stuff. But it, the point is, surely their case cannot hold any water by just looking at any given supermarket that you walk into the door of.
Well, yeah, and
yeah,
I mean, the RSPCA have been using that mantra. The earliest I could find was 100 years. They've been using animal lovers as a potential slogan or addressing things towards animal lovers. So, what research have they done that didn't take that into consideration? But the other thing that I want to say as well was, I mean, I didn't like the way that Alex answered that question about veganism because he kind of just said, well, I said I'm vegan. Yeah, but when you're telling people that the premise here is all they've got to do essentially is love animals, and then you're just dropping the hint that you're vegan with no other message and no connection, anyone that does actually put two and two together is going to think that veganism means loving animals. Nothing else. You're not offering it as a solution. You haven't explained anything about it. And the rest of your messaging is so focused on that that's the only thing people are going to pick up. So I think it needs to be talked about. I don't think just saying, well, I'm vegan, think about it and make the connection yourself is enough unless the rest of their claims making suits. Because
and
otherwise that's
Yeah, I
where
think that's a really strong point. I mean, if you're essentially saying, "Well, I'm vegan as an individual," and if you're interested, Google it. Well, where the hell are they going to end up if they
exactly why
Google
I
it?
made Help
Yeah,
Going Vegan,
exactly.
that is, the website, because we kept having these conversations with people and it's like, yeah, go watch Earthlings, go watch Dominion, go do this. And you leave them, you chuck them in at the deep end. And the people that are actually willing to go and research that, it's like, well, they're researching crap. So you have to provide the information too.
Exactly
well,
that,
yeah,
because
but
they're not actually getting a vegan message, are they? They're just seeing the obvious
Yeah,
wrong.
they're just seeing a horror show, and that I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're right there, Kev, because the point is they need to go somewhere where they go, oh, look at this. This is an interesting philosophy about the future and about the way that we live and about humanity and all the rest of it. And that then, if they align that with a horror show, well, that's all very well. But if
That's
they just see
exactly
the
how
horror
my
show.
reality page is set up for on the Help Going Vegan, and that's literally what the inspiration was from conversations like this, where the people where you think, oh yeah, actually they're going to go and do something about it. What are they going to type in? They're going to type what is vegan in Google, and dread to think what they're going to read.
Well,
So
you
yeah,
get
it's
a
kind of like,
dictionary definition, aren't they?
yeah,
yeah,
exactly that.
yeah. You see, Animal Rising could have something on their website about veganism, and they could, and in the statements they put out, they could say that ordinary people can do something about this
Yeah,
by
I mean, I
and
mean,
read.
perfectly to add
Yeah,
on to their inclusivity sort ofness. If
yeah,
you're physically not able to get to one of our things, one of the best things that you can do right now to make a difference is go vegan. How hard is that as a
yeah.
message to put at the bottom of every email that they send out?
Yes, and of course the other thing, the other thing with them is it's actually sending out a message to vegans to not mention veganism.
Yeah,
If if
that definitely
if
is.
they're saying that veganism is a scare word, then and you see what's
Well, to be
happened.
fair, Ronnie, they haven't actually said that, right?
Well, no, they've not said that, but it kind of it sort of amounts to that.
It's implied, yeah.
It's implied, yeah, and that kind of pretty much sums up all of it, really. That they kind of think it's going to put people off, right? But the thing is that you see that what's happening with them is that they're kind of, you know, they're constantly trying to recruit people, and it, the, they divide people into two groups: arrestables and non-arrestables. You know, people that are prepared to be arrested, you know, to take part in actions, and non-arrestables who are people that can support in other ways, right? But what is happening is that most of the people they're getting coming forward are non-arrestable people. People that are saying we support you, want to help you in some way, but we can't afford to be arrested, right?
Yeah, but what does that mean, Ronnie? Does that mean that you couldn't do the dairy thing and just sit there?
It basically means that when they did the dairy farm occupation, for instance, none of them were arrested, but there was some risk of them.
But all of them were in the category of arrestable. You see this?
All of them were in the category arrestable. The same,
Yeah. You see,
yeah,
this goes back to what Kevin said before to me.
yeah,
If you think about the NAL and the other liberation leagues back in the 80s, they would take people into farms and they would take people there to experience what a farm was and the smell of it and the look of it and the kind of taste of it. You never kind of forget. And so, Kev was kind of saying, well, will we ever get to a situation where non-vegans will do that kind of dairy type thing, and they will then themselves get a taste of what the reality is. So they might go to the Grand National, but they wouldn't go to the dairy. But it would be good for the non-vegans to go to the dairy, right? It's just
Well,
that if you've got the complication of arrestable as well.
yeah.
Yeah. You see what happens, because there was some risk, as it happened. They didn't get arrested, and I don't think they actually broke the criminal law because they didn't do anything that would. It was
It's
ordinary
a
trespass.
trespass, wasn't it?
It was ordinary trespass, which isn't a crime.
Yeah, it's
They
just a
didn't.
civil
They
matter,
didn't.
isn't it?
They
Yeah.
didn't do anything to put it into the category of aggravated trespass, which is a is a criminal offence. But on other things they've done, obviously when they did the dairy blockades back in September, and that they blocked the entrance to the dairy depots, then yes, that was yes, they were breaking the law. They were obstructing the highway, or it could be aggravated trespass. It could be public nuisance. There were various laws that those people, you know, were
But
arrested.
again, though, to be fair, that was all vegans again, weren't it? Because I know a
It
few
was all
people that
vegans,
did
yeah.
that.
They were
And then none of their claims making back then was about being animal lovers, trying to get animal lovers out
no,
of the dairy thing
no,
again.
no. You
No.
see, what's happened. There's kind of been a change because, like the history of Animal Rising is that they were originally Animal Rebellion,
Yeah.
and Animal Rebellion was a split off group from Extinction Rebellion. And what it was, that there was people involved in Extinction Rebellion. I think vegans that were involved in Extinction Rebellion that didn't like the fact that Extinction Rebellion weren't really saying anything about the contribution of animal farming and indeed the fishing industry as well towards the climate crisis, which is in fact a huge contribution.
Yeah.
And because they weren't happy about that, they said, "Well, we need to form our own organisation to focus on that," and that's why Animal Rising was formed. So originally, it kind of had very close links with Extinction Rebellion, and a lot of the philosophy was the same as Extinction Rebellion's. And then, kind of what happened, there seemed to be this kind of change of tack where. Because what happened? They were doing actions against um, animal agriculture, and to a smaller extent the fishing industry, but it's mainly animal agriculture. Like, for instance, they kind of blockaded McDonald's distribution depots a couple of years ago. Then last year they blockaded dairy depots. There was those actions in the supermarkets where people were pouring milk away, and there was all that kind of thing, right? But the messaging that came out of that wasn't about the plight of the animals directly oppressed by those industries. When they did the dairy industry blockades, their messaging wasn't about the plight of the cows and the calves and the huge numbers that are the victims of the dairy industry. Their messaging was about the harm that animal farming is doing in terms of it driving the climate crisis, and we need to move.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
need
Yeah,
to move towards a plant-based future to combat the climate crisis. You see, and what happened was that there was kind of, quite a lot of unhappiness about that from the activists that took part, because they said, calling all vegans. Now the reason those people are vegan, now, yeah, they may very well be concerned about the climate crisis, but the reason those people are vegans is because they're concerned about the cows and the calves and
yeah,
all the other animals that are directly oppressed by animal farming. And so, of course, what they
Or
were doing,
both, of course.
yeah, yeah.
or both, but I think probably in the minds of really all of them, what came first? What came first was the animals that,
The
and it's a bit,
chicken. The
yeah,
chicken.
they kind of, it was like, because it's a bit like saying, like, say if you went back to the days of the slave trade, say for instance, that, the ships used for slave trade caused environmental harm, say. And there was a campaign against the slave trade saying we need to end the slave trade because the harm to the environment caused by the slaving ships. And people would be like to say, well, hang on a minute, wait a minute. Isn't the primary reason to end the slave trade because of the plight of the slaves? Isn't that what you should be talking about first? Do you see what I
But
mean?
the point is though, you would have campaigners doing exactly that if the climate crisis was a big deal during the anti-slavery campaign.
If
Yeah,
it
you
was
would have.
real, but the point is that yes, I mean certainly mention it, and it's really important to mention it because of course the climate crisis oppresses other animals as well. Once again, we've got an example of something done by humans where the main victims, are other
Yeah, but you
animals.
see that is one of the things that's really lacking in the discourse is the fact that that should be one of the first things to be said by vegan environmentalists.
Yes, because the main victims. I mean, 3 billion other animals perished in the forest fires in Australia that are directly attributable to global heating. 3 billion, 3 billion, and that's only and it's happening all the time. Other animals are perishing all the time because of the
And there's
effects of.
bound to be a hell of a lot more than that because they're not
Yeah,
probably, presumably, counting it every rat
Yeah,
in a
it'd
hole
be
or
a
rabbit in
guesstimate
a.
based on their figures that probably aren't all that accurate.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's happening. But that's only one snapshot of what's going on. I mean, all the
Yeah.
time,
So
there's
if we were to look at this really critically for a moment, as animal rising have formed, so how many people, seriously, like what percentage do you think of people that would have usually gone to the racing have stopped going to the racing and joined animal rising?
I can't
I
imagine
don't,
it being very
I
large.
don't,
So
I
I
don't
mean,
think.
you're thinking potentially like I am that the vast majority of people that have turned up all this year to do even the anti-horse stuff have already been people that don't usually attend these events anyway.
Oh, I'd say the answer
Yeah.
to your question would
Right.
be
So essentially, when you look at
no.
who they've actually influenced, who are they changing? Well, none of those people, because they weren't
Well, Andy,
contributing to
I
these
think they
anyway.
would say, "Well, give us a chance. We're
Yeah, yeah,
new,
true. But then obviously
Well,
again with the dairy stuff, it's like calling all vegans. So it's like, well, you're not influencing anyone there either.
No,
well,
but again, it's a kind of like they're kind of like laying the groundwork, or this is our modus operandi type of thing, and so that it said, look, this is just early days yet. Don't judge us
But
too quick.
what I'm trying to get at is, if they'd have come out at the very beginning and saying we are now animal rising, the reason that we started this group is because we want to have a vegan ethic at core, and this is essentially our baseline. How many people wouldn't have turned up to the events that they've arranged?
Yeah,
no, they
well,
would.
I mean, this
They
goes back to what Ronnie said, which is
yeah,
that it's a bit odd, isn't it? This
I
kind of
honestly don't
focus on,
think,
but,
on
with the
horse
stuff they've
racing and stuff.
done and the people that they've got potentially support them, that if they'd have come out from the get go, that initial statement when they said, we're now Animal Rising, that we are now a vegan group, I don't think that would have put off anyone that's helped them.
it would not. It would not have put off any activists. In fact, it would have. I think
I
encouraged.
100% agree. I think it would have inspired
Uh,
more
But
people.
obviously, you see, the point is, I think you've got to be careful here. The activists are not their audience; they're their tools. The
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
audience
that,
are
yeah,
not.
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
yeah, the audience. The audience is. Well, you see, I think what happened first of all, you see, and I think there's been a bit of a change, and it's also been a change that's kind of occurred within Extinction Rebellion as well. Is that originally, really, the idea was to somehow put pressure on the government that all this disruption that Extinction Rebellion carried out, and I think that when Animal Rebellion started their own disruptive activities, that the idea was somehow that we'll cause this trouble, and it'll somehow kind of make the government think, and cause the government to kind of move the nation towards a plant-based agriculture. I think that was the idea, and it was certainly, I think, is the idea of the groups that are causing disruption in terms of wanting to do something about the burning of fossil fuels, right? That was the idea. It was to somehow pressurise the government, and then what happened was, of course, instead of the government being in any way affected by that to make any meaningful change, all that's come out of that is they brought in even more draconian laws against protest. You see, so that's been
Yeah, you
effective.
see, that's a question I want to ask, right? Is when they say we want to start a conversation, how do you think that they imagine what that is and where it is and who is having these conversations? Are they talking about in a pub or in a family or what?
Well, I think yes, I there's like a kind of they kind of maybe want to start people talking about it amongst themselves, because they're not going to be able to have a direct conversation with the Animal Rising people, are they? So to kind of could generate a conversation.
Well, I mean, they're not saying write to your MP, right? So
No, they're not. No,
no.
because you see, I think that's kind of where it's kind of where it's changed. I think they've kind of sort of realised that um,
Yeah, but Ronnie, going back to Andy's point, and in the sense that we probably don't see anybody that has kind of, as it were, right, I'm never going to go to the Grand National again, and I'm not going to go to
no.
Epsom and all that. So who's having this conversation, and what effect might it have?
Well, I think they just. I think it's just that they want people obviously to have a conversation one with the other, and or what about, oh blimey, what about this, horse racing? I see that there's people, causing disruption, and um, those people said certain things
See,
about,
what worries me, right, is
you
that
know.
if you're stood on a corner or even in a cube and you're having a conversation, at least that is a kind of directed kind of thing, and it might have some substance. Whereas if you're just kind of, splatting something out there on the 10 o'clock news and going, right, population, have a chat about that. I mean, talk about undirected.
Well, I think this is the problem, and I think they're somehow hoping that something will come out of it that kind of actually won't, because it's not sufficiently directed. Whereas if you said that, um, you know, if ordinary, you see, there's the same lack of direction really in terms of the horse racing campaign, because the two major things that ordinary people can do to combat horse racing is not to go to it and not to bet on it. Right? That's the way. And if nobody went to horse racing, if nobody bet on it, that would be the end of it.
And this is what I'm saying. This is what I mean. Like, and how many of the people that helped out in various ways on those various protests all over the country were actually going, were actually betting, and have actually changed their mind? And how many of those people that were actually in attendance have come out of there and thought, "I'm never coming again because of
Well,
those
I think,
people"?
but it's. I think the problem is, unless you say to people, you see, I think a lot of it comes really, and it's a remnant of their previous association with the Extinction Rebellion, because Extinction Rebellion have got this very strong kind of mantra of like system change, not individual change. In other words, we don't want to lay responsibility at the feet of individuals for anything. It's kind of we need to change the system. So this idea of asking any individual person to do anything isn't really within their remit and isn't what they really want to do. They sort of want to, cause some sort of a stir, which will somehow.
Vegan Design is saying some really interesting things in the chat, right? First of all, let me see about they, getting
Well,
people to
feel
think
free to jump
because
on if you want to.
But
Save you
well,
typing.
I think the thing about talking to one person on the street versus Sky News, of course, if something's on Sky News, it's going to reach a lot more people. But that's the very reason you want the message to be the right one.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
see that
exactly that.
that's the thing. You can reach millions of people on Sky News, and you've got on someone on Sky News. Look, the best thing anyone can do an individual person can do to combat this. In terms of like, they can, if they've just done an action, say, against the dairy industry, they've spoken all about the plight of the animals and the contribution to the climate crisis that animal farming causes. That's already been said. And to say, like, at the end of it, that there's a really important thing that everyone can do to combat this, and that is to go vegan. If you go to our website, you'll find information about doing so. Now, just think if that message reached hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, how important that would be. And
Yeah,
yet,
and the good thing about that, something as simple as that is, you've got to expect, and we've already seen this happen a few times now with Animal Rising already, where they'll say something and their message isn't even too bad, and it already gets changed, it already gets diluted. I mean, there's an example in the film. We had that conversation a few weeks ago on Roger's show.
yeah,
So we've already got to take that into consideration. Whereas if you're saying something as simple as, the one thing that everybody can do right now is go vegan, that
yeah,
can't be conflated in any way, shape, or
not
form.
at all. And of course, the other thing is, if they're frightened of the word vegan, if they think vegan is a scare word, and I presume if they think that the word vegan is a scare word, they will consider the term animal rights to be even more scary. What do you get in the newspaper headlines? You get newspaper headlines in the Daily Mail saying vegan mob invades
Yep.
wherever. You get headlines. The headline in the Independent the other day about the rescue of the lambs was animal rights activists rescue lambs.
Yeah. So they're
Straight
already
away,
being given those
yeah.
labels by the media that they're so
Yeah.
scared of.
So even though the point is they are being called vegans, they are being called animal rights by the media, whether they like that or not.
I'm
So
surprised you haven't picked up on this, Ronnie. Vegan Design says you can't underestimate the scale.
oh
Talking to
yes,
one
no,
person on the street versus Sky News.
oh,
Now,
oh, oh, oh,
first,
no, I just spoke about that. I said
yeah,
yes.
no, but I mean, I was surprised because not what I expected you to say, so I'm going to say it instead. Is the thing is, first of all, you've got to be critical about the scale of millions of people seeing Sky News, because what is Sky News going to say? How shallow is the coverage and all that compared with talking to people on the street? Now, what Ronnie wants is for everyone to be on the street talking. So
Yes.
it's not as though those particular spokespersons, those 5 or 6 spokespersons, transfer to the street. You're talking about thousands of people transferring to the
Yeah,
street.
and I think where the huge kind of sort of disappointment in a sense that I kind of had with Animal Rising is that you know they are doing actions that have so much potential, or certainly some of their actions. I mean, say the dairy blockade, right? The amount of media attention that grabbed, both nationally and in local newspapers, right? Give them an ideal opportunity, right, to say to the public, you know, to send out a go vegan message to the public, but also an ideal opportunity to speak to vegans and to say to other vegans, look, here we are, trying to spread the vegan message, right? And we are people who are prepared to be arrested and prepared perhaps to go to jail. We're prepared to do this. You too can play your part to support this effort by and how you can play your part, how you can support us is by doing vegan outreach. You see, so they could have
Do you
included
kind
all
of? Sorry,
vegan.
I've
Where
just.
was that dairy farm, Ronnie? Geographically, where was it?
It was
It's in
indoors.
Dorset. It's Grange Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? If there'd have been a blitz of the local villages and towns and everything by saying, there was this action last week, and this is just because I mean most people in those towns won't know that thing is there
Well, well,
and
well,
won't know
well,
what it looks like.
it was really interesting because there was a raid on a pig farm by I'd say raid isn't the right word. There was like an occupation of a pig farm in it was in West Yorkshire, and it was done by Meet the Victims, because Meet the Victims it kind of Meet the Victims was kind of somewhat similar to what Animal Rising did at the dairy farm, where they're all dressed in these kind of hazmat type suits and kind of go into go into a farm and kind of occupy the farm and try to negotiate with the farmer to maybe rescue, an animal that was maybe sickly or something like that. Well, they did one at this pig farm in West Yorkshire, and the pig farmer reacted very violently and seriously assaulted some of the some of the activists, right? But kind of what happened after that was that local people started produced leaflets, about this particular pig farm, but with a kind of underlying message to people that the way to combat this is to go vegan. And those people distributed thousands of those leaflets all around the local area, even to the extent that the farmer came out and tried to actually attack some of the people that were doing the door dropping because he got to hear about it, you know. But you see that's what happened there. They did
He
try.
sounds like a charming lad, that farmer.
That's a charming lad, but of
I've
course,
got a video. I've got a video of that on my TikTok.
yeah,
If
yeah.
anyone
You
wants to
see,
watch it.
so the thing is, right? So they did do that. Vegans in that area did do that. Did try to build on that publicity that came out of the pig farm
I think if
occupation.
sorry, guy, I just wanted to say one thing. I think apart from the scale, the thing I was talking about, like Sky News or any of these news programs when they interview them, I think there's also another point to it other than just the scale. It's also that people, when they see something on Sky News or they have a guest, there's a certain like credibility to the message. And I think if you think about like giving out a leaflet on the street, you don't know who that person is. They have nothing. There's no backing to them to say that, okay, this is something which has. And we can argue about these news corporations. They don't have any credibility, and we can argue about that. But I think generally for most people, when they see someone interviewed by the reporter on Sky News or whatever, that immediately gives them more credibility than somebody just giving a leaflet on the street.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that
I don't.
we
I don't
don't.
disagree with that at all. To
I
be
don't
fair,
think we.
No,
I wouldn't say we don't need to do people on the street as well. Like we need. It's not like either of these things. We need both of them. And I think the
yeah,
good thing about Animal Rising is they're using lots of these new methods and ways to use like media and smart. I also found it interesting that they were like doing like at the Epsom, like some of their social media stuff was also slightly different in ways of protesting. Like they had people in like stupid stuff, like people in wheelbarrows and stuff, like showing obviously like stupid alternatives to like having fun. But like I
yeah,
think it's
they had it as a family fun day
yeah,
sort of
I
event.
think
Yeah,
which I hadn't really seen from them before. So that's kind of interesting strategy as well. So I mean, I think it's not perfect and it's a bit rough around the edges, and I do agree that criticism on like the language sometimes is missing out on rights and not being really clear on that, and also kind of confusion about climate, and is it about climate or is that like an add-on or is that like the main thing? I agree with all that criticism, but
yeah. To be fair,
generally I think they're
that's
doing
pretty much
great
our
because
only criticisms. I mean, I'm not sure if you was in at the beginning, but in terms of action, who else? I mean, I'm not pretending there's not little small groups out there that are liberating and doing all sorts of things. However, in terms of national groups, they're the only one that are doing anything direct. And in
yeah.
terms of inclusivity, like
and it is getting
again,
people to
brilliant.
think about it. Like,
Well, I think it's. I think this is why it's such a shame that there's some things that they could do better,
Yeah,
because
and
they're,
I think your point,
yeah,
to be honest, Giles, in
yeah,
regard like their credibility, only goes to cement that messaging has got to be right, because you
yes,
might not get another chance.
yeah, I think that's fair, and I think they're getting better. If you see some like interviews with vegans on morning television, like even 5 years ago, or like it was basically just vegans looking angry and like screaming and then fulfilling all of the stereotypes that I'm not saying it's easy when you have people kind of provoking you and all of that, but it was just such a kind of chaotic, and there was no message. Nobody watching that is thinking, oh right, this is what I'm going to go vegan. There was no talking about exploitation of animals. It was just like a shouting match. And if you look at how they handle it now, it's very calm. Like they've obviously done, training, and they've been, they've probably done practices where they're throwing at them different comments, and they have like statistics and all of these things. So I agree, it's not perfect, but it's so much better than 5 years ago.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
oh yes. I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's just a pity that an opportunity to encourage large numbers of ordinary people to go vegan is being lost. And I think that's a really big shame,
Yeah.
because and also an opportunity to encourage um, vegans, because you see, if someone signs up for animal rising as a non-arrestable person, there really isn't, for most of those people, there really isn't anything they can do, really. So what should happen is those people should be encouraged to do vegan outreach.
Yeah.
As part of the overall effort, we're like the kind of spearhead. We're the spearhead of it. Causing the fuss, creating the publicity, making people think, raising awareness. But you're kind of coming up like behind in support of that, doing all the vegan outreach, and the combination of those two things, I think, would be really powerful.
Yeah, and they obviously have like better also skills of people on like production crew of like, drone footage and planning all of that stuff. Like I think the quality of the filmmaking that's coming out is also improving. So there's probably people also, not doing arrestable roles who are improving all of that side of things, which really helps because once you've done some action, you need, quality footage. That's what's going to be looked at afterwards.
Yeah, I think that, yes, I think there are people in non-restful roles that do very important things within animal rising, but I think the vast majority of those people that sign up as non-arrestable people, there kind of isn't really anything for them to do, because the majority of the people they really need are the activists, and
Mm,
so those people are left with, well, what do we do? And they're not actually saying to those people, what you can do is do vegan outreach,
I
because
see.
it's
Yeah.
ideological opposition to kind of you know changing, trying to change people as individuals, which is obviously what vegan outreach does.
Yeah, I've got a couple of observations. Vegan design, I'm not quite sure what I should call you actually, but
You can just call me vegan design. It's
oh,
fine.
okay. All right, Mr. Design. So, I mean, first of all, I was interested in that 5 years thing. Like who was screaming and shouting, because back in those days that was Aspie, Ed, and Carbstrong, and even Joey didn't kind of scream and
Yeah.
shout.
Well, Joey, actually, I was thinking about Joey. I really like him. He's a great, he's a great activist. But I think sometimes he was, he easily could be riled, and I guess he's,
Yeah, I think
he
riled
gets
and
very
screaming is different, isn't it?
emotional. And I think that he did, like, if you see the way, like, they're still kind of provoking, and if you go on GB News and stuff like Animal Rising have, you'll get those people who are trying to kind of prod a reaction, but I think they're much better now. I think they've obviously done the training or whatever to not rise to the bait. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
I
one,
would.
one of the calmest people ever on the media was Ronnie. I mean, very quietly spoken, and never lost his temper.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, maybe I'm not. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's. I'm just talking about like 5 years ago, or I
yeah,
don't know when Ronnie you were on the TV, but
oh, about
yeah.
500 years ago that was.
Yeah.
Like 5,000.
But yeah, of course, all throughout, and there's always, examples of people who would do it really well and calm, and I'm sure you do it well today as well, Ronnie. So I'm not saying it's like all like that, but I did notice with Animal Rising that it's at least the messaging that's allowed to be broadcast. It's not just people just trying to get like a clip of a vegan being angry, which used to be all it seemed to be. That's like when they had them on the morning television shows, they just wanted, some footage of an angry vegan because it was satisfying to watch.
Well, yeah. The other point is what Ronnie was saying about the spearhead thing. There's a sociologist called Richard Gale, and Ronnie was saying the spearhead is kind of like what you might call in the terminology, or at least the terminology that I adopted, was called social turbulence. In other words, that's equivalent of having these conversations. And the reason that they're having these conversations is because somebody's done something that has created a newsworthy item and that kind of stuff. So this could be regarded as social turbulence. In Gale's model, it means that in the end, the counter movement and the state agencies have a conversation, and they will translate the animal rights message into an animal welfare message. But this is why, if we have a lot more grassroots vegan activists to give people the actual vegan message, that's a great improvement, because you're not relying on the state having a conversation with itself. You're actually trying to do that on the street, but you're still using this social turbulence, which would be created by something like Animal Rising.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of saw that, didn't we, off the back of the Grand National and stuff, where all of the proposed talk and all of the proposed changes, they're all welfare based. Not talking, we weren't talking about even abolishing racing, to be honest. We were talking about lowering fences, reducing the amount of horses, making it safer.
Yeah, we finally get the opportunity to have a conversation, and we talk welfare. That's the
That's the
problem.
thing, yeah. That's the. I mean, you made a great point earlier, is in who are they hoping to have this conversation with? Because the vast majority of people that are potentially going to have it with them have got no intention of doing anything differently.
So, see, once again, I'm not sure after the Grand National whether any of them said what ordinary people could do about that. And as I said before, the two things ordinary people can do about horse races is not go to it and not bet on it. And I'm not sure that anyone from Animal Rising actually said that, because once again, that's kind of asking people to make an individual
I don't
change.
think they did, and if
Yes.
they were sort of telling people not to say "you bet they die," then I don't think that.
Yes, and it'd be interesting to see what they've said, kind of whether anything like that has been said in relation to Epsom.
Yeah,
Because of course with Epsom there isn't Epsom is a flat racing course. You don't get the deaths on the course at flat racing that you get at steeplechasing, but you still get deaths of horses that don't make the grade and deaths of horses that after their so-called racing career comes to an end. And that's the same with flat racing as it is with steeplechasing, and that's by far the greatest number of casualties. The numbers killed on the courses or shot on the courses is only a tiny percentage of the casualties
yeah.
of the racing industry.
But Ronnie and Andy, aren't you missing the point that I raised during the Still Alive, which was the agency? Are you saying that people don't have any agency and they can't connect any dots whatsoever? So you've got to connect every single one for them.
No, I do think that people are capable of connecting the dots. But if you, like I said, if you actually look at that interview that Alex was referring to, where he said, "Well, no, I didn't talk about or promote veganism, but I did tell them I was vegan. I did tell them that I was vegan."
Yeah, but with the horse racing, Ronnie said you didn't tell them what to do. Well, it's obvious what to do, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, but I'm not sure. You see that people, especially with the betting, you see most people probably don't realise that a percentage of bets on horse racing goes to support the horse racing industry. It's the same with greyhound racing.
I also think, like I said earlier, I think a
Yeah.
lot of those people didn't attend and didn't bet anyway. So it wouldn't be necessary, unless someone is going to point out to the other people that's what they need to do to stop. It wouldn't occur to them because they don't contribute to those things. Sometimes we can be quite small-minded in that sense because we no longer contribute to these things or we don't do these things. So we don't think about the repercussions of others doing them. So it could well just have been that as well. I mean, it sounds really simple, but I don't remember seeing that mantra from any most of the vegans either, in fairness, that were nothing to do with animal rising.
But yes, because you see, that's what I mean. Basically, if people didn't do either of those things, that industry wouldn't exist. And in fact, one of the reasons, I mean, I was involved.
Yeah, but it's so obvious that you don't need to say it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, but I don't. But I think particularly with the betting, you kind of do need to say it. I think obviously if someone, because most people who support horse racing financially don't actually go to the horse racing itself. They support horse racing financially through betting, and so they might think, well, I'm betting on horse racing either online, through one of these betting websites, or I'm going in the bookies. I'm not giving any money to horse racing. I'm giving my money to the bookies, so I can still bet on the horses. What people don't understand, by and large, is that a percentage of the money that they bet at the bookies goes to support the horse racing industry. You see, so if we can get people not to
I find it very difficult to imagine that people don't think that, oh, if I bet on horse racing, it's got nothing to do with the horse racing industry.
well, you see, if they're betting on, but you see, it may be that some people will make that connection, but there's no harm.
Well, who won't though, Ronnie? Who won't make that connection?
I think there are people that may not make that connection because they might think, yeah, I'm betting on this race, and I know like horse racing isn't a great thing, but whether I bet
At
makes
the
no
Grand
difference.
National, like the Animal Rising protests outside the gates of the Grand National, they had lots of people like gathered. They had all those signs saying "You bet they die."
Yeah,
So I
but
think
they were told to take them down.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
weren't allowed to chant.
Yes. Yeah. You see,
okay.
there is no harming. There's no harm in actually kind of pointing that pointing that out to people. Um, I mean, really, this is what we used to do when Louise and I ran the campaign. We did it for about, I think it was about 13 years. We had a campaign against the greyhound racing industry, and basically, kind of how we, made an impact was there were regular um, protests outside the tracks.
Hi, here's a reminder.
Oops, I'm getting this. I'm being played back here. um, where where um where leaflets would be given to people, people would have those signs. You know, you bet they die and stuff like that, and that actually resulted in reduction in the attendances at these places, and that that caused quite a few of them to close. Um, so that was a message aimed at the people going to the racing that kind of was effective. Now, with horse racing, I think horse racing is a more difficult nut to crack than greyhound racing for different reasons, but it's still the same principle, I think.
Yeah, it's a serious question based on what you said a minute ago. So, are they getting a percentage of money bet on horses at that track, or are they getting a percentage of money flat rate? Because if so, like the issue is betting on anything.
No, the issue is there's a horse racing. It's called the horse racing levy or something, and what happens is if someone places a bet on horse racing, then a percentage of the money they bet goes into a fund which supports horse racing in general.
Well, they're mainly supporting the government, I think, aren't they?
Well, no, that's a separate thing. There's a tax on them. There's a tax
Yeah,
on the
that's
bet,
what I mean. Yeah, so
tax on the bets that goes to the government, but there is also another percentage taken out of the bets that goes to the horse racing industry, and it's the same with greyhound racing. You see, so that if someone bets on horse racing, they might think that their money's either going to the bookies or to the government or to both. But in actual fact, there is a percentages of it also going to support the horse racing industry. Because what happened, you see, and the reason that happened was that the big blow was dealt to both greyhound racing and horse racing. I think more so to greyhound racing when the law was changed. I think back in the 1960s, which allowed high street betting. Because prior to that, the only way that someone could bet on a horse race or a greyhound race was to actually go to the track, to pay to go in, to pay to get into the track, and that's where they could bet. You see, and you had huge attendances. I mean, there was one particular greyhound meeting at the White City in London, which I mean closed years ago, where there was I think there was 70,000 people attended a greyhound race meeting. Huge number. He's got huge numbers because
70,000 animal lovers, Ronnie.
Yeah,
they were
animals. Yeah.
all of them animal lovers. Yeah, and when they
Well,
brought
they
when
love the dogs.
yeah, they love the dogs. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, in actual fact,
That's a
um,
slogan, isn't that? This wasn't that the slogan that they used
it's
to use.
well, it's the name of or it was the name of a website promoting greyhound
Yeah, I
racing.
was going to say, I know, I remember
Love
seeing
the
it flash
dogs.
along the
Yeah,
advertisement
love the
boards. Yeah,
dogs. But I think that probably meant love going to the dogs
go into the dogs.
rather,
Yeah,
rather than loving the actual dogs themselves. But you see, and then what happened was when these high street bookies were allowed to open, people didn't bother to go to the track anymore. A load of people didn't bother to go to the track because they could go to the bookies and bet. And so that took loads of money,
yeah.
especially out of the greyhound racing industry. So that's why they brought this levy in to say, look, we need to
Yeah,
put
so
some money.
they demanded subsidies
Yeah,
because of that.
subsidies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. See, so that's kind of how it happens.
I mean, if nobody goes to the actual race course, you could just have a virtual dog
That is
or
pretty much what happens
a
now.
dog or a horse race, and everyone just like we just
But
tell them that
when it comes
we
to
just tell them that
the
it's
few
real, but
greyhound tracks that exist,
it's all
almost
CGI.
everyone watching is watching on a computer screen.
Yeah, what happens? What happens?
Fake it.
Yeah, what happens with they do have there is virtual greyhound racing where it's like just a kind of animated thing. It's done by AI or something, and they have the terminals in some betting shops where people can do that, where they can bet on virtual greyhound
Do you
They
know
racing.
should
what I
just
used to
film one
love?
of those
They put
machines
one
in
of
the
these in the
amusement
bookies.
Yeah,
arcade, couldn't they?
Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know the old-fashioned horse racing things at that arcade
Ah,
where they'd be
yeah,
on the
yeah.
track. Why
I
don't they
know what
just
you
chuck one
mean.
of them in the bookies?
Oh yeah, they do have something similar in the bookies. But you see, the other thing that happens, I know it happens with greyhound racing, is they have these races that are held on like a weekday afternoon, where they don't care if nobody goes because they're staged to beam them into the bookies,
Yeah, with
be it or
greyhounds,
not.
it's called a bags meeting
It's
where
called back. Yeah,
they don't
yeah,
get any
exactly.
attendance and it's just
Yeah,
played at like the bookies. That's right. Yeah.
yeah, they just and that helps to keep the industry alive because a percentage of that, and also the tracks get paid by the bookies to do that as well. You see, so the betting is a huge part of what keeps it going.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time before Hull Green shot, they were doing it was basically something ridiculous like £1 for your entry, a program, and a drink.
Oh yes, yeah, they had, yeah, they
But
really.
Ronnie, you've just said betting is a huge part of what keeps it going, but you're suggesting that most of the punters have got no clue about that.
Well, well, some may do, and some may not. But the point is, there's no harm in actually pointing it out to people. I don't see any negative aspect of pointing that
No,
out to
no,
people.
I don't either. I'm just talking about, the fact that there isn't such a lack of agency that you seem to be implying sometimes.
Well, I think some people might join the dots and some may not. But I think it's important to make sure that they do, and no harm done in making sure that they
But I
do.
suppose it goes back to our earlier point where if these people have made no effort to make the connection or been either had it explained to them that going vegan is something they can do now, which really has a massive difference, then potentially some of those people that went and protested earlier this year are not going to do anything else now because they don't bet. There's no more racing or whatever that they're interested in. That's their mind changed about that. So they're not going to contribute. They're not going to attend, but they haven't changed anything
What
else.
must have happened? This is a lot of implication really, but what must have happened is that AR have looked at all the research, looked at all the sales psychology, looked at all the psychology, probably spoken to Leonard and Melanie Joy, and they've probably been told that in the situation, whether you talk about racing or dairy, don't tell people what to do. Seems to be one of their big values. Don't tell people
Kind
what
of,
to do.
but that also goes back to the mantra that came from Extinction Rebellion and was carried on into Animal Rebellion about it's not about individual change. So when you're suggesting what those people do, you're suggesting they make an individual change in what they do in their own life, and that was not what Extinction Rebellion was about. It was about this kind
This
of
is the
social.
confusing part. It's almost like don't do anything yourself. Just have a chat about it down the pub, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't that exactly the same mantra that's kept everyone indoctrinated by religion for the past, what, 10,000 years? Where you don't actually think about it, you just kind of do what you're told, and essentially, you just it's just belief.
Yeah, but Andy, we're saying about this strategy of not telling people what to do, so they're not being told to do anything.
But I
But
think it's
yeah, so
obvious,
who's
right?
solving the issue? Who's solving it? Who's that's what I'm saying. It's just that wish of we'll pray and it'll fix itself.
It's. I think it's being hoped that they'll somehow work it out for
It's
themselves.
awareness raising, isn't it?
I think I think it's just more psychology. So it's like if you tell people to go vegan, they don't like being told what to do, right? So
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with that because we
their
discussed
idea is
before
to
the difference.
make the problem so explicit, and there's no like everyone knows that they are vegan, and they're, people we're speaking up about veganism, but you don't actually say like to go. I mean, I often say go vegan to people, but I guess the strategy is that you don't actually make that your main punchline is to say you should do this. You just make it abundantly clear. because the psychology of people
I
don't
think
like being told what to do.
they've seen research which suggests it's actually best not to do that. I think
It's best to
Yeah,
what?
well, not to give people explicit instructions.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I think.
I think that's the same in any area, whether it's like in business or anything. It's like it's sometimes if you're trying to persuade, I don't know, some other teams of a strategy or something, then like explaining all the problem or what we should do and making it so abundantly clear. Okay, this is the right vision, the direction is better than just saying you should do this, because people don't like being told what to do. They want to come to their own conclusion.
That's right. Yeah, remember Ronnie? You remember Tim Geyer from AR Zone, right? Remember he used to be a car salesperson, and he
Oh yeah,
said that he was taught never to say to somebody, "Buy this car." You just kind of take away all the reasons why they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do totally understand that. My only sort of issue would just be to come back again and say, that's fair enough, but if you want people to sort of work it out for themselves, then stop talking about animal lovers and making that a huge part of what you're doing, because that's the connection they're going to make.
No, but that's to get them on board, isn't it? Is to get them on your side. We're all animal lovers. This is all kind of pop psychology. This.
Yeah, but if that's the case, we're all animal lovers, and then you drop the I'm vegan also. So the connection they make is vegans are animal lovers. They're not seeing it as a solution to the problem. They're seeing it as, well, I already qualify.
No, I think the suggestion there is that is too blatant.
but you see, I don't necessarily think that, with the action that they did in rescuing the lambs, I don't think people in seeing that would necessarily make the connection that they should go vegan.
No, and it's only the vegans that have been supportive. If you read the comments on that, there's a lot of criticism.
I think a lot of people think, oh, that's terrible. Maybe the government should do something about it. Or people would just think, oh, that's terrible, and then they'll just.
The way to resolve this, right, is to watch the Still Alive show, and every time Alex mentioned, because he must have mentioned 20 books during that thing, or 20 pieces of research, we ought to write it down, find out what it says, because that's the answer to why they say.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, I think that's right. But you see, the thing is that what's happening is, that they're activists that take part in these things are really, I would say, exclusively vegan. I don't think they've got anyone taking part in any of their actions that isn't vegan.
Yeah, well,
right?
you said that they're their tools, yeah, but they're not their audience.
But those vegans, for the most part, they're not just doing animal rights activism. I know people that are active in animal rights, and then the next weekend they'll be out doing a cube of truth, or they'll be out doing.
Yeah, but why is that relevant though, Ronnie?
Well, it's relevant because you see that basically they're kind of implying that it would be better for those people, rather than doing a cube of truth and having information that's saying to people go vegan, that instead of doing that I need to go through all my leaflets and cross out anything that mentions veganism and just write in, that we need to have a conversation.
Well, that's a real big assumption. I'm not sure you can draw that really.
Well, you see, because you see, if they think that it's not a good idea to directly encourage people to go vegan.
Yeah, but in the context of themselves,
in the context themselves, but then, if they're going to adopt that in the context of themselves, that it's actually, not the best way to promote veganism or promote animal liberation, which presumably.
Yeah, I think they might actually agree with you there, but I think they would say, well, look, we're not going to obviously try and convince AV to not talk about veganism, right?
Well,
they'd be overstepping their mark, really, in the same way that we did.
They kind of obviously wouldn't be able to do that. But you see, what they're doing is they're recruiting activists who do vegan outreach, and then saying to those activists, you mustn't mention the word vegan. You mustn't talk about veganism.
Yeah, I think that's the reason that they go on the shows that we put on, is the fact that they realise, as we said, an hour ago, that the vegans are the activists. So these are the kind of tools that they need in order to get the action done. But they're certainly not the audience. And the only thing they've got to do is keep the activists on board with what they say to the audience.
Well, yes, I think the reason why activists stay on board is because activists want to do the
Yeah,
action.
so they cracked it then, haven't they?
So basically, they'll put up with stuff that they're not very happy about
Yeah,
because,
so the strategy is working then, isn't it?
well, I think it's working for now, but how long
Well,
that
yeah,
goes
yeah, and no. I mean, I would still argue that it's only working with the people that it would have worked with. If the day that they announced Animal Rising was forming, they said we're a vegan group that wants a vegan future. I don't think anyone different
No,
would
but
have.
Andy, that's the thing that they don't want to say, but
But
they
they, but they,
do.
but that's because they're worried that it's going to alienate people. But I don't think that anyone has not been alienated that's joined them. I
No,
think
but
all these
they've
people we're
got
talking.
35 books telling you you're wrong.
but you see that, but
Well,
you see,
then I'd expect to see the numbers reflect that.
but at the end of the day, though, they're described in the media as animal rights activists. They're being described in the media as vegan mob. They're being that's what's being said about them, and that's unavoidable. So really, bearing in mind that that's being said about them, then they might as well encourage people to go vegan.
I think it's interesting when they had like some of the news people or the people against animal rights and against veganism were saying when with the horse protesters and stuff, they were like, "Oh, well, this is just some like cover because their real intention is to get everyone to go vegan with their diet," as if these were like totally like unrelated things. The idea of a horse race,
But
and you could see like they
that's
couldn't
exactly my
connect.
point. Yeah,
Yeah, they
I don't
couldn't
think
connect
that
the
connection's
dots
been made.
between they to them it was just inconceivable like these were the same thing. But the good thing was when they say these things, then Animal Rising obviously like saying this is about exploitation of animals in every sense, not just in horse racing but in our food system and stuff. And they don't use the word vegan, but they do encourage people to kind of think about things in a different way, I would say, than perhaps they used to. And what the anti-vegan thought was a gotcha, like, oh yeah, we exposed you because your real
Yeah,
motive
because
is
the media think, okay, we can undermine you by naming what you are, right?
yeah. But it's like, yeah, that's what it is. That's what it's
But you
about.
see, you see, the thing is, if they asked me that, I'd say, well, yes, it is important for people to go vegan because and then explain why. That would be how I'd react to an
Well,
accusation.
I think Alex would say, well, it was definitely important for me to go vegan. You see, that's how they deal with it. You see, what it is as Mr. Design is saying, they've obviously got a particular way of putting themselves over, and they've got a particular presentation that they stick to, which is they're almost like got a bit of a script going.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of find that out too. So when Louise did the sit-in at the dairy farm, and he said that she got to say her bit, and she knew that part of it would be cut out. Did everyone get to say whatever they want?
Well, yes. What they did was they
Because
recorded.
obviously I did a video response to that, and everyone bar Louise, and I think it's Nathan that came after her, talked about animal lover, blah blah. Literally the animal
It sounded
rising.
like they were reading a script, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Because I literally said to Roger, like, is everyone reading a script? Like that's how it appeared.
I think some of them may be because I think some of them may have lacked the confidence to kind of really say their own thing.
Yeah.
You see.
Which is fair enough, but one of the things I was going to say is that, in terms of their tiptoe and progression, if you look at the claims that they made at the Derby versus some of the claims they've made this week, they are slowly talking more about exploitation. They are talking more about use, and there's still obviously the consistency with the animal lover thing, but they are slowly shifting their language a little bit.
Well, they did that on that thing that you mentioned, the fact that the guy kind of translated it into cruelty, but the guy said, we shouldn't use other animals, whether for racing or for food.
Yeah. Well, there was that I can't think who it was with Jacob and Alex, in fact, from last week. And although it probably wasn't planned, and I don't think it would have come up if Jacob hadn't have suggested, well, it is about welfare. But it was a great statement that Alex made in response. It's like, well, no, we're not. It's not about welfare. It's about use. I mean, that was great. It's probably the strongest claim they've made so far. but I don't think that was a planned thing to say. I think it was just a result of what was said to him.
No, I think they're sophisticated enough to know that they've got their own set of claims making, which ideally they'd like just to present as it is, but they know that it's going to be spun, it's going to be questioned, it's going to have other kind of, concepts and ideas attached to it, and so they're going to just have to ride those waves as they go. That's essentially what's going
Yeah,
on.
yeah, and I mean, obviously, we're just all speculating here. For all we know, behind the scenes, so to speak, they could have some sort of plan that's just like, right, by the time we get to September, this is how we're going to start talking about things. By the time we get to December, this is how we're going to start.
Well, they
Like,
did kind of hint that a little bit about the animal lover thing.
yeah, but which I suppose we've got to give them that time. It's still only been a few months.
I think also for them, the other danger of just saying like go vegan is because when they say that, a lot of people misunderstand and think that just means about food. So because the messaging is so poor, or the public understanding is so poor, that they need to then not just say go vegan, but actually explain all of the things about the food system and horse racing and all the kind of background, rather than just say go vegan, because the public's understanding of those words
Yeah,
is
that's a
only
fair
about
point,
diets.
because like if you say to people on the street go vegan, are they going to make a connection to horse racing? No.
No.
No, no, and I do agree with that, but I also think potentially that's why something as simple as in their email correspondence and at the bottom of their post, something as very simple like, for any of you that want to be involved but don't know how, making the change to a plant-based diet or whatever is a real simple way of avoiding all of this exploitation. Like, just something very simple, which doesn't put any pressure on people, which explains,
But
you know,
Andy, there must be something about the research that they've looked at which rules it out.
well,
Yeah,
if it's coming
Otherwise
from
they'd do
someone
it,
like
right?
Tobias, then yeah, I can
They're not
definitely
doing
understand.
it, and so there's got to be a reason.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head by saying that let's have a look at
but,
the books and the stuff they've
but
mentioned.
I'm just wondering whether it is just kind of Tobias. I mean, it's more than them
Well,
because
the cheese example that Alex used and the way that he answered my question when I asked him outright told me, yeah, absolutely, because that cheese example was more or less word for word something that Tobias has said before, which is why I noticed it and asked the question.
so what was it he said,
I can't
Andy?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've watched sadly enough Tobias clips to know that I recognised it as soon as I heard it.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't too dissimilar from what Alex O'Connor asked Peter Singer, like if he was in a restaurant or something was sent to you, so to speak.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Yes, yes.
Well,
Because
Alex fielded that question.
Yeah, on
because
your show.
yeah, but you see, not mentioning the vegan thing. Now it's strange. Now I took part in a Zoom call where Viva have got this idea of trying to create local groups.
That'd be Vegetarian International Voice for Animals, would it?
Yeah, the vegan charity. They're now called the vegan charity as well. But you see, they've got this thing about they want to get people active locally, which which is a good thing. I mean, they kind of want to get them active locally, kind of just using Viva stuff, which kind of isn't such a good thing. But it was interesting that when they were talking, the couple of people that were presenting it, one of them said that we kind of, um, you know, we kind of go along with what Melanie Joy says. She was mentioned, and the fact that they kind of adhere to what she says about how to communicate with other people, right? But Viva still use the word vegan, and they still say go vegan. That hasn't, despite their adherence to, you know, to Melanie Joy, that hasn't stopped them from promoting veganism. So
No,
it's
in fairness, credit to Viva. I mean, they do use veganism in their message. It's all over their
yeah,
website and all that
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff. So
So the Melanie Joy
In the
connection.
last 10 years.
yeah. It's not been a long thing, but it is there now.
So which makes me think that whatever research Animal Rising have done, and whatever that what they
Well, I
so
think it's a style thing by then, Ronnie. They can't. Well, I mean, for example, they've just rebranded themselves as a vegan charity. They can't suddenly kind of get shy of the word after that.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
well, no, I think I mean that's obviously very true. But you see, um, but but yeah, it was kind of interesting to kind of note that. But you see, the thing is, Animal Rising could have something on their website which kind of connects all these things up, because they could encourage people to kind of go to their website, which a lot of people probably would do anyway if they're interested in, or they'd go to their Facebook page and then.
Well, that's why I thought the footer of their email is perfect, because they're not harassing anyone, right? Like, these are all people that have given their email address because they're interested in doing some action, or they're interested in receiving updates. So these are people that have kind of consented for you to give them a message. I think that's such an easy thing to do.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with that. But even in their media statements, if they
Yeah.
said that, what you said, Andy, about they either kind of encourage people to go vegan, or even at least plant based, and then say, you can find out more information on our website. Then
Yeah.
if people go to their website, then there could be a deeper explanation on their website of kind of, the philosophy of veganism, and the reason why people need to adopt that.
Yeah,
And you
because
see
the
what I
other
mean?
part of this is, let's just take for a moment and say, okay, it's generally accepted that there's some bad stigma around the word vegan now. It's not a good word, blah 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 blah. How are we going to fix that without continuing to use it and take it back? Avoiding it is never going to address that issue. It's going to make it worse. So
Yeah,
they've got to
you've got
rebrand
to
the entire
take part
movement.
in Watson's idea of ripening. But Ronnie, here's a question for you. You're saying that Viva now openly advocate for veganism, but I mean, is it still? Because I mean, when they first started doing it, just like Animal Aid, and this is only a few years ago, it was really essentially about a diet. And like, I mean, are you sure that they really push the philosophy now?
Well, I think the philosophy is
I don't know. I'm not committing to that.
well,
They
I
definitely used the V word.
yeah, 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 yeah. Um, I think they talk about, the way in which animals are oppressed and exploited, and the fact that people can do something about that by becoming vegan. It's kind of
Yeah,
I
but
go that.
the one credit I would say for Viva, from what I've seen from some of their messaging, is even if they are referring to veganism as a diet, they are still offering it as a potential solution. It's still seen as like the thing that you should do.
Yes, yeah, because Viva really, they say quite openly that they're a consumer. Their focus is on consumers, and trying to change, like consumer behavior, consumer habits, rather than being like a political lobby group, which is where they're a bit different from Animal Aid, because
Or a cultural revolutionary thing?
well, it's kind of it is about changing people as individuals, which obviously can lead to cultural change. I think they kind of that's kind of how they're looking at, because they're saying to people, adopt the reason to adopt a vegan diet is because of what it happens to the other animals. So it's like kind of it's said for that reason. Yes, I mean they do talk about vegan diet being more healthy, and they do talk about the environment, but I think primarily it's about what happens to the other animals, that they're encouraging people to do that. So there is that kind of philosophical sort of connection there, and then that in turn, I think, can lead to cultural change.
Yeah, I would also, I mean, taking all these other groups into consideration, I think even more so why there is a gap in the market, so to speak, for a group that come out and say, yeah, we're vegan as fuck, deal with it. Because there isn't anyone else doing that either. It's not like there's any other group that are like that. Every other group is very sort of like baby steps, and it'll be okay. You do what you do when you. So like they're just meeting that stereotype still. They could actually have pushed away from that and been something different.
Well, yes, I kind of think so. I mean, I just think, you see, I think that you kind of, the idea of, the idea of fairy steps. I mean, would it not be better to kind of put something forward that causes people to kind of totally flip in how they and how they look at the world? You know, would that not be a better way of, because there is either one way of looking at the world or an opposite way of looking at the world, isn't there? And so you're trying to get people to look at the world in a completely different way through baby steps. Now, is that going to really work? Or do you need to kind of do something that will make people totally change their mindset?
Yeah.
See, and because that's what happened to me. I'm
Yeah,
not
no, and
saying
I think it's
for other
quite key as
people.
well that even the occupation of a dairy farm where you're literally going to be sat in front of baby cows, they still only put that appeal out to vegans. So the animal lover thing can't even extend when it comes to babies. So it's never going to extend to other animals. I mean, if you can't get people to go and care about, say, baby cows, baby chicks, lambs, this kind of thing, like they're never going to care about the adults. That's the one sort of occupation you think, come along, come along. It's very low risk.
Bad Kitten says vegetarians are primed to be vegan. They just don't know that they can actually, funny enough, in my experience, be the hardest.
Yeah, I was going to say. In fact, I'd say
Yeah,
quite often
they,
vegetarians are the most reluctant to change.
it kind of can be. I mean, I found out. Had I not gone vegetarian first, I don't know how long it would have taken me to find out about veganism, because I actually found out about veganism through a copy of the Vegetarian Society's magazine. That's how I found out about veganism, and I got hold of the Vegetarian Society's magazine because I was a vegetarian and thought, oh, I didn't know there was a Vegetarian Society, and this is it. I'll have a look at their magazine, and the article about veganism, and that caused me to go vegan. So, but not everyone's going to kind of. I think a lot of people are vegetarians. They don't even know this vegetarian society.
Now, Uncle Lou's Kitchen says something interesting. That's why I don't bash vegetarians. Now, it's interesting because I think the vegans have always said, although Watson did call them the lactose, which is a bit of a pejorative, but the vegans have always said, don't bash vegetarians, but criticize vegetarianism.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think what would be great would be a way of actually, you know, kind of getting our message to vegetarians, because I think there are a lot of people that are kind of vegetarian that will go in the supermarket and buy the vegetarian food that they don't want to eat parts of slaughtered animals, you know, but they kind of don't really know. I mean, there's less excuse, I suppose, these days for
Well,
not knowing
one
about.
of the things that go against the vegetarians, Ronnie, is the fact that is in the past, like 15 years ago or something, they might have dipped their toe in a dietary sense and tried a bit of vegan cheese, and because it was so different, let's call it back then, they're kind of prejudiced against it, and so we get a lot of vegetarians going. You go, oh, here's a sample of vegan cheese. Oh no, I tried that, years ago and it was horrible, and they kind of think it's still the same.
Yeah, I kind of yes, I think that's that's probably true. That's probably true. But I think if there was a way of actually kind of better targeting vegetarians, you know, that because if they're not, if they're just vegetarian, they decide they don't want to eat animal. Like kind of I was really before I just happened to pick up the copy of that vegetarian size magazine. If I'd not picked that up, I might have just carried on as a vegetarian for
Well, I
years.
do get the impression that a lot of modern day vegans are pretty kind of forthright and sometimes rude to vegetarians. And I don't know whether that's because they seem to be so resistant, and you think, why are you so resistant? You're kind of getting it, and yet you're not, and so that might result in the kind of oppositional response, something like that. But I mean, again, it's not a question of, oh, I'm going to criticize vegetarianism. I mean, a lot of modern day vegans seem to have a real go at the vegetarians themselves as individuals.
Yeah, see, I was vegetarian because it was out of concern for other animals. It's just I wasn't aware of what happened in the egg and dairy industries.
This
But
is
your
the key
case is so
point,
long
right?
ago as well, Ronnie, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I mean, I was vegetarian before I went vegan, but it was literally once I saw what I saw, it was a heartbeat decision. So
yes,
that's where I find the problem is if that's the case, like they don't eat flesh because they don't want to for whatever reasons, and I understand that. Once you make them aware of the egg, the dairy industry, and all this other stuff, it should be that simple. And when you
yes, and
resist,
Well, it wasn't though, like the big discourse that happened within the vegetarian movement. They had a lot of vegetarians arguing about how, the dairy industry and the egg industry can be very humane and everything. So there was a big argument within the vegetarians about that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a kind of mixed bag. I think there are vegetarians that kind of I've gone this far, but I'm not going any further. I think there is that, and I mean I know people personally.
Yeah, I've done
Um,
enough. I'm doing enough. Yeah.
yeah, I know people
Mm,
personally that simply
absolutely, in exactly the same way that I've had that resistance from people that are in cat, dog, rabbit rescue that are like, well, why don't you go and speak to people that aren't doing anything? I'm already doing this. I'm doing enough.
yeah. You see, because I think that there is a resistance within people to change. There's this big
Yeah, but
kind
it
of
only be the same. I mean, your point, Andy. If some fruitarian comes along and says that to us, we're going to go, oh no, we're vegans. We're doing enough, aren't we?
Wow, I suppose. But if we go by reasonable vegans logic, then a fruitarian is probably the most damaging lifestyle that you could ever exist. Have you seen
Yeah, but who's going to go
the
by his
exploitation in
logic?
one
And
apple?
let's not call it having any logic, please.
yeah.
But
But
yeah,
I think the
well,
thing yeah.
I suppose. I mean, to be fair, if I could afford to be a fruitarian, I would be one. So it would suit me fine. It's only a money situation.
I think it's also the question of could we feed the whole world on a fruitarian diet, and I think that's very doubtful. Whether we could actually do that, and so there's also that question that comes up. Whereas, of course, you could feed the whole world easily and much better on the vegan diet.
It's not practicable for me to be
It,
fruitarian.
yeah,
Do, do fruitarians
it's possible.
eat nuts?
Yes, they do.
Yes, yeah, yeah. No, only tree nuts, isn't it? Only a certain type of nuts, I think.
They'll eat anything that can be removed from a plant without killing the plant.
That's it. Yeah, that's right.
In other words, it'd be fruit. It would be it could be seeds, couldn't it? In some senses, and obviously nuts. Now you could,
Yeah, I suppose sunflower seeds would be fine.
I think you could, I think you could survive probably very well on that diet, but it's just a question of can that really be universalized, so that everyone could live on it, and I'm not sure it could. I'm not sure it could.
That's
I
the
mean,
very argument against veganism by a lot of people.
well, no, I mean, yeah, but it's exactly the opposite to that, though, isn't it? Like veganism can be so easily universalized, can't it? And you know, and at the same time, a load of land,
Yeah, but
being
hang on. What are fruitarians? I mean, take food out the equation for 1 second. What are fruitarians' sort of like ethical views?
Yeah, well, it's usually pretty health based, isn't it?
No,
I
but I
think
mean in terms of like oppression and that kind of stuff. Are they vegans that are fruit that only
I think they
fruit?
just do smoothies, don't they?
Because I mean, that you potentially you could be a fruitarian rapist, right? What's their ethical views? Because I'm not sure if it definitely is
well,
included.
I think fruitarianism is a diet like vegetarianism and like
Yeah,
Chris.
so potentially,
It's not philosophy. It's not a
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would claim that fruitarianism is a philosophy, and it's an advance on veganism because it incorporates things like ahimsa, which veganism doesn't.
well, don't does fruitarianism incorporate ahimsa?
I don't know. I
Well,
don't know enough about it.
dynamic harmlessness. I'm sure that would be something that they would talk about. Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, I've never really had much of a conversation with. And I know a guy that lived on a fruitarian
So
diet.
is it very similar to like Jainism, basically?
Well, I'm not really sure. It depends on the reason why people were doing it. Because like I knew a guy that was a vegan and he adopted a fruitarian diet, but it was for health reasons. He did it as a kind of cleansing thing.
Well, surely the most ethical is a breatharian anyway.
Well, yeah, except you wouldn't live very long,
You
would you?
wouldn't live very long, no, but your
You
carbon
know,
footprint would be pretty tiny.
yeah, it would be. There's a huge potential in the world for nut trees because, of course, nut trees would serve two purposes. I mean, obviously they'd help combat the climate crisis while provided. And in fact, there was a guy I know. He very much promotes, the growing of nut trees. He's not fruitarian, but he thinks, that we ought to grow a lot more nut trees. And he says that it's the most efficient form of protein production in terms of if you're growing protein, you get far more protein out of it than
Oh
kind of.
no.
Until it's Saturday night. Graham's got the jokes out.
I knew that would happen. I've got this open air gig near me, and soft sell are the people at the top of the bill. And
Yeah.
I've just heard "Tainted Love," and whenever I hear that song, I never can get it out of my goddamn head.
Oh, it's an earworm, isn't it? What they call an earworm.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go in a minute. I've got to go to.
No, that's
But
fine. I'll probably only do until 10:30 anyway. So
yeah, yeah, because
I think I'm also going to pop off, but I just want to say on the vegetarians bit, just rewinding a bit. I think the thing that irritates me of a lot of vegetarians, especially on TikTok, is that they'll come on to a post which is about vegan activism, kind of trying to say that you're being too pushy or you're being too much with veganism, at the same time as saying like, oh, we're on the same side.
yeah.
And
I
I'm
totally
like,
agree with that.
no, we're not on the same side.
well,
And
no,
like
no,
to
no.
them, it's just like a diet, and it's like they don't see a big difference between veganism and vegetarianism.
A lot of people will say that though, oh, you're almost there. I've known loads of vegans to say to vegetarians, oh, you're almost there. And of course, that's not really true.
No, I mean my mum's sister, my auntie, she's been vegetarian my entire life, and actually now she's a pescatarian. So there's there's your progression.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
30 odd years and actually exploits more life now than she did before.
yeah.
So
I mean, I've known people. I've known people that have been or were. I mean, they're vegan now, but they were like vegetarian for 30 years, and through all that time, they absolutely knew the reasons for veganism, but they still didn't.
well, I've had conversations with vegetarians that are vegetarian because of essentially the treatment of animals. Who I've literally had conversations with and say, why don't you want a cow? Oh, well, because it's cruel. Would you wear leather? Yeah, of course. Well, where do you think leather comes from?
Yeah,
Where's your stance here?
Well, all they've got to do is go to Melanie Joy's book and they'll read that you can get eggs and dairy without violence.
Yeah, but you can't get leather without violence.
but I think I think we kind of. But I'm prepared to go this far, but I'm not prepared to change any more than this.
Yeah. Like I said, I found that quite often within.
kind
And they're
of-
only from vegetarians. Then we're talking about non-vegetarians too. I'm in dog rescue. I do this transport, or I do this volunteering, or I run this, and therefore I'm already doing enough. If you want to push someone, go and speak to someone who's not doing anything.
But you even get that amongst people who consider themselves vegan, and especially in terms of environmental consideration.
Yeah, but there's a lot of sociology here in the sense that a lot of people are really attached to to the norms and values of their society. They're really attached and they completely kind of adore their families and stuff. And so for them to put themselves in a position where they're the outcast in their own family is probably one of the most painful things you can imagine them doing.
True. So this is a genuine question just before vegan design pops off as well. What do you think the rate of vegetarian conversions is now compared to say 15 years ago? Do you think most people now go straight into veganism, or do you think there's still people that are going vegetarian first?
I think more go straight to veganism now,
Yeah.
simply because it's kind of easier to get stuff.
You seem to find a lot of the vegetarians that are reluctant to go any further have been vegetarian for quite a while, a good number of years.
I
Yeah, I
think
think
if you go vegetarian because of animals, as I did, I went vegetarian first because of animals. It's very hard to avoid, learning what happens.
Yeah.
And then, pretty quickly you're shifted over to veganism. But if you went vegetarian because of health or the environment or something, I guess you can stay vegetarian longer.
If all you've ever done is engage with vegetarian recipe books, then you're not going to get it, are you?
yeah. Although
Yeah.
I've known vegetarians, say, within the hunt sabs, who are obviously there for the animals, that have taken ages to become vegan. They have eventually, but it's taken years and years, despite being surrounded by vegans. And it's
Yeah,
very.
but you see, the point is they might not be totally surrounded by vegans in their social life, Ronnie. That's the point.
I mean, yeah, possibly so. I think with these particular ones, I think it was the cheese thing. This kind of
I think I think a lot of people, especially the vegans who found it easy to go vegan, which is obviously a problematic thing. They kind of think, well, it was easy for me, so therefore, right, dot dot dot. But that is really a very crude misalignment with sociological factors there.
Yeah, no, I do totally accept that. The only times where I expect to see that instant sort of shift or very quick shift is kind of just as Vegan Design said. If you've gone vegetarian because you don't like what happens to the animals and you're just not aware of, say, the egg and the dairy industry, once you are made aware, I'd expect you to change your mind very quickly for the same reasons that you're
Yeah, but again,
vegetarian.
Andy, I mean, in one of my talks, I talk about the way that we can not know things as much as know things, and human beings are very good at not knowing things. We can block knowledge, we can divert knowledge, we can make things go into the background, put it into kind of soft focus. We're really good at it. So if we don't want to know something, we'll find a way of not knowing it.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Yeah, I think that's
I think
right.
it's a mixture, like leather and stuff. Of course, like even when I was thinking about becoming vegetarian, like I'm not stupid. I mean, I knew that was the skin of a cow, but I guess there was other stuff which was like, what happens to
But
to
modern day
in dairy
vegetarians are
and
liable
egg
to be
production. I
on plant
didn't know.
milks and stuff now, right? So,
Sorry.
I think modern day vegetarianism must be a bit different from traditional vegetarianism, because surely a lot of modern day vegetarians are on plant milks and stuff. It's just the eggs and maybe the leather that is a problem for them.
Yeah, but I think even if they're on plant milks, I don't think it's about animals necessarily, or about what happens in dairy farms. I think it's often even non-vegans are on those things, and I think it's often like lactose intolerance or environment, or just they've seen it and they think it's trendy or something, like all kinds of reasons. But I don't think that the not knowing thing that you're talking about, I think it's true with some topics like leather and stuff, which is clearly you can't just not know that an animal's killed. But there's other things where it's like eggs and dairy industry. I think there's still a lot of ignorance out there, like how these systems operate.
Yeah,
well, even within the vegan community, you still got debates about honey and
Yeah.
right on the backs of horses, etc. So
I think it's a shame there's not a way, because I've often thought about kind of if there's a way of inserting a vegan leaflet into vegetarian products in the supermarkets, so you're kind of specifically targeting vegetarians. It would be good if we were able to do that,
Well,
I think.
one thing that I've never really understood, and I suppose this would also tie in for a lot of the gluten-free sort of companies as well. Why don't they just make all of these products plant-based? So what is the point in having a vegetarian market? Why don't they just make it plant-based and taste the same and literally just tap into all of it in one?
because they get pushback. In fact, there's been a few articles where vegetarians have criticized vegans for taking their vegetarian
Yeah,
stuff away.
but it's still going to happen. I mean, the vegetarians complain about it, but I think it's not.
Well,
I think it's not going back the
financial
other way.
sense for the companies, doesn't it? Because the vegetarian market's only going to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle.
Yeah, it's a little bit to do with the fact that some people, and vegetarians included, have got this mythology in their mind, this kind of ideology that if it's an animal product, then it's got to be authentic and real. It's not a kind of manufactured type thing in a factory and stuff, which from a vegan point of view doesn't make any sense and doesn't really resonate. But I think for them it does. This is a real product. It's not one of your fake things. That's why I think they like to use phrases like mock meats and fake meats and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you see, so much food that is produced for meat eaters is processed. They eat loads of processed stuff, don't they?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
if you ask
absolutely
them, I bet
filled
they
with
wouldn't know
plant-based
that.
products as well, like corn and soy. So, yeah.
That's right. So it's
Yeah,
not
but you
really.
still get people coming out of McDonald's going, "Oh, this is natural, not like your vegan
Yeah,
shite."
I know. And there's as much soy in that half the time as whatever we'd be eating.
And plus, it's highly processed. Well, it's gone through, a load of processing. I mean, all burgers have gone through like a load of processing, haven't they, really? Whatever they contain. And I think that's that's the thing. It's not. I mean, ideally, I mean, of course, I'm from the days before any of this stuff really was around. So it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, I will eat, I do eat like the vegan burgers and stuff like that sometimes. But if there were none of them,
Welcome, Ronnie Lee with his time machine.
it wouldn't
What
bother
did
me.
you
Yeah.
What did you guys used to do, say, years ago for like a barbecue? Then what would you have done in that situation? Was a barbecue just a no go?
Well, there weren't. Well. Really, the whole idea of barbecues didn't really exist in those days. I don't think
Oh,
people
okay.
did barbecues, did they, Roger, way back?
No, I don't remember it. But then again,
No,
I don't remember things like pizzas and stuff.
because you didn't really even have like, when I was young, you didn't really even have kind of burgers, even meat burgers.
Oh,
No,
okay.
that's
That
not. Yeah,
people didn't have that. That's very much something I think
it'd
that
be
came
like a
from.
lamb chop, wouldn't it, or
You'd
something?
have a lamb. You'd have a lamb. They were fish fingers. I suppose that's probably the nearest to kind of processed food. There were fish fingers around when I was a kid, but I can't really. Yeah, I think burgers was kind of starting to come in. I remember when the Wimpy bars came in before the McDonald's. They were the Wimpy bars. Remember when they
Yeah,
came?
they were burger based, weren't they? A wimpy burger.
Wimpy was the burger, and then you had a big thing. Something that was very very popular was these kind of restaurants, eating places called Spud You Like, which baked potatoes, and you could eat there. You could eat there. You could have vegan there if you had a baked potato just with beans. Then that was your vegan meal in Spud You without any margarine, because of course the margarine wasn't vegan.
And,
And
it,
so
and it'd be kind of like sausage, egg, and bacon and that type of stuff, wouldn't it? I mean, like, do you
yeah,
remember on the way back from Sabs, you used to get on the A roads. You used to get like a little kind of almost like services. Do you remember what they were called? It wasn't. It was
oh, I can't. Yes, I kind of know it's on the tip of my tongue. Uh,
yeah,
they're kind of not around now.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
They've all been taken over by someone else. But I know exactly the places you mean. Yes,
yeah.
and
The smaller ones. It was just like almost like an extension of a garage sometimes. But
it was, and
yeah,
you used to get beans and chips. What you could,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you
that's
get
about the only thing you could
beans.
get.
A mate of mine. He was on a date. He said, "I'm, started going out with this woman. Like, I'm going to take her out." He ended up taking her to the motorway services because it was the only place he could think of to get vegan food. So I don't think their relationship lasted very long after
Is it
that.
Little Chef? Not
Uh,
Little Chef.
Little Chef, yeah. Oh yes, I think it was. I think it was Little Chef. Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
The side of the road, but yeah, he took her to the motorway services and for beans and chips.
Yeah, because I mean, we would go one further on, and we'd get beans, peas, and chips. We would.
Oh, beans, peas. That's a that's a kind of strange combination. Yeah, yeah, beans, peas, and chips. Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's what we used to have. It used to be like staple, food that we used to have like on the way home from. But beans and chips and black tea. That was what it used to be.
And you'd have to check what they fried the chips in.
Well, they fried the chips in, and what the beans were, because sometimes beans in those days had
Yeah.
milk in, didn't they? So it was kind of, it wasn't like the easiest thing in the world, but yeah, we persevered. You see, at the end of the day, you see what is really important for everyone to realise is that what we're talking about is just a taste. What we talk about is just a taste, isn't it? And so basically, people that want to continue eating meat, they're saying, I'm happy for all these animals to be slaughtered, along with all the suffering that very often is included in that, and happy for these animals to be slaughtered at just a fraction of their natural lifespan, just for a taste. That's all it is. It's just for a taste. You don't need to eat it. You don't need to eat it for health. You don't need to eat it for survival or anything like that. They're just doing it for a taste. Now, that is when you think of it like that, that is totally unjustifiable and totally unethical.
Yeah, but the same would be for chocolate involving child labor, clothing involving sweatshops. There's
Oh,
lots.
oh, 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 absolutely, and I think it's important to do something like that. And in terms of things like clothing, it's also the kind of, I mean, we look at, say, something like cotton. We regard that like, that cotton is totally a vegan product. It comes from a plant, but there's something I spoke about in another chat we were doing about, there's this. It used to be a huge inland lake in Central Asia. I think it's Kazakhstan, is it? Uzbekistan, or that kind of area, right? Called the Aral Sea, and it's been almost completely destroyed because of all the water that's been taken out of it for the cotton industry that is in, that surrounds it. And that is because, people are buying cotton garments, wearing them a couple of times, throwing them away. And because cotton requires such a huge amount of water.
There's lots of Spanish rivers now that don't
Yeah,
meet the sea because of the fruit they
yeah,
grow.
yeah. You see, but because of this kind of, instead of being, much more careful in our consumption, because people are so profligate in their consumption and just kind of buying things new all the time, and then just getting rid of them. That's caused that problem, and that is by a product that is kind of
Yeah,
totally
it's
wrong.
our consumerist society, isn't it?
It's
But I
consumerist.
tell you what, I always, well, I haven't done it for a long time now, but one film I used to plug a lot is if you go to YouTube and put in home project and put home in capital letters, you get this 90-minute free film. It's absolutely amazing. It looks amazing. It's kind of like a vegan related film, but it's not vegan at all, but it is, if you know what I mean. It's really amazing film. It's called The Home Project.
I'll have to have a look at that. Yeah, yeah.
Have you never seen that? No.
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing film. I mean, just looking at it is just a treat in itself.
Yeah, I'll definitely look at that. Yeah, I'll definitely have a look at that film. That does sound good. But I'm gonna have to go because I've got
No, that's fine. I was just waiting for your conversation to finish, but I didn't want to
yeah,
interrupt.
yeah.
So that's fine.
All
I'm
right.
Well, you
Bye,
have to wait a long
guys.
time for that, then, Andy.
yeah. Thank you for joining us, Vegan Sign. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. Interesting
thanks very
chat.
much for coming on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye
All
bye
right. See you
then.
guys. Bye bye.
Yes, bye.
So yeah, we will be here again same time next week, 8 o'clock. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you then. Take care. See you later.
Bye.